Welcome to the In Search of More podcast. I am your host, Ellie Nash. Join me weekly on my quest for more from myself and more from this world. We'll see you on the other side. Welcome, Max. I'm sitting here with Max Gilbert. Max is the founder of Tiferet Coaching and Shalom in the Home. So what intrigued me about your story or your work is that you do work with entrepreneurs and business, and then you do work with parents. And this has been something that I've been exploring recently, is the connection between like inner work and money and our relationship with money and how important it is and how much it tells about us. So having that clearly from our conversations, you see it as one thing, not as two diverse businesses that you're in. So I'd like to explore that with you a little bit, the connection between business, inner work, the parenting work you do. So give it a little bit of background on kind of each area, how you got into it, and then we'll dive into the conversation.
So on the coaching, so I've been doing sales coaching and executive coaching and working with tech founders and startups. My background was in biotech and in venture capital and doing consulting in that space. And I started working for a startup and was chief of staff to the CEO, and they were in Y Combinator and raised money and exciting things are happening. And so we're both doing a lot of things, and I'm doing some sales and some marketing and some fundraising, and he's doing all those things, and we're kind of tag teaming it. And then when we raised our Series A, we're like, great, now we can go hire a real salesperson. Good, we don't want to deal with this anymore. And we interviewed a ton of people, and no one quite seemed right. We hired a guy who seemed perfect on paper, perfect resume, perfect background, had the Rolodex, and just didn't show up, but didn't move the needle, which is a story that I've since heard again and again, and particularly in that area. And we kept struggling.
Be a little sensitive to using lingo that are like
yes.
kind of tech firm lingo that makes a lot of sense in that world, and won't to a listener who's not familiar with it. It's like a Series A.
Series A would be your so you get seed funding. It's like or now there's pre-seed funding, but your sort of conceptual idea. Once you're Series A, someone sees you as a real business. You have real potential scalable business model that you could put money into. You could hire more sales and marketing, and you could get more customers. And there's sort of a thing here that you could pour money into and crank more money out of. Versus it's like in this existential stage of, is this anything?
So seed funding would be, you have an uncle you go to, or maybe you even get to Y Combinator. You find someone who's saying, okay, I'm going to throw money at just this idea, this conceptual idea.
I mean, I have companies that raise $10 million in seed funding.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah. I know it could be real money, but I'm saying it's...
Yeah. But from there's VCs that specialize in seed funding, and it's still this big bet on...
but at that point in time, nothing, right?
They could have some partner, some design partner, some early customer relationships, but there's not the sense of this is what we do, this is what we sell, this is who it's for, this is our business motion, this is how we actually will grow this business. They're still in this identity formation phase.
Got it. And Series A, hey, this is what we're doing, and you're going out to other kind of venture capital firms and saying, hey, would you put money into this idea? Okay, so perfect.
Great, thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, call me out on that if I. So the founder his wife had also sold her business recently because it's San Francisco, so everyone's a founder. And she had a sales coach who's also an executive coach, this guy named Tom Batchelder, who has this book called Selling 180 and his program Selling 180. And we're sitting down with him thinking about how do we hire for sales. And he was just like, Max should do it. You're actually doing it. Like, why don't you just do this? And I had this just viscerally negative reaction to the idea of like being a salesperson. It's like, I could do it. I can sell, but like being a salesperson, just to me, I hate when I'm sold to. I hate the feeling of someone trying to convince me or persuade me, or I don't answer my phone for cold calls. I just like that whole energy is so icky to me, and I couldn't see inflicting that on other people.
I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah. And it was two things. One, the founder, my boss, said, I'll pay you like a salesperson if you do this. So I had a kid on the way. So I was like, all right, that's intriguing. And, but mostly, Tom said, read my book. It's an easy book. And the whole 180 of Selling 180 is sales is an inner game. And if you can if you can be unattached and show up looking to add mutually beneficial value to people. And I just listened to your last podcast, right? You're looking to, and he didn't put it in such religious terms, you're looking to make connections. You're looking to help people. You're looking to add value with an abundance mindset versus sort of a scarcity mindset. If you're out there in the world doing those things and kind of have the integrity, then the work becomes managing your inner state to sort of stay calm and regulated, to hold space in sales conversations where it like hit central mantra of his is creating space for truth, right? Versus salespeople pushing their agenda on you. How do I actually get you to say what's true, which may be that you don't need my product, and that's fine. But either way, it's a valuable conversation. So that really clicked for me and resonated for me. I was like, I could do this. This sort of vibes with my whole sense of, avoda and purpose in life. And just now it's a sort of a new manifestation of that. And was super successful in that. And then as we grew and scaled, I tried to then hire and teach salespeople that. They were so sort of entrenched in their salesiness, it just didn't work. So instead, we were a company selling a product to scientists at other companies, so B2B, like pharma R&D teams. How do I just promoted from within and helped them find their friends of scientists who had never sold anything before and were also like, what? I don't know how to do this. And also intrigued them with more money and a different lifestyle. And it was COVID, so a lot of them were like, I want to work from home. How come I don't get to work from home like everybody else? I have to be in the lab wearing 10 masks. And it just became coaching. Like, how do you take all this expert? You can relate to these people. You understand their problems. It's like, but I don't want to convince them. I don't want to try to persuade them. I don't want to try to force them to do anything they don't want to do. I'm like, I don't want you to do that either, right? So how do we help them? And I'm talking about money and talking about pricing and figuring out how to send a cold email. And what if they reject me? Dealing with rejection. All that stuff was so juicy and fun and interpersonal work. And they had all of the relevant expertise and experience. And once you're able to make that connection, we kind of grew like gangbusters. And then we're able to raise $80 million after that in a Series B. And then I started working with other founders and other teams doing that. People who have like a fear or confidence issue around sales, but have to. Founders in particular, right? How do I sell this thing without selling my soul? And working with people and figuring that out.
So was your work, and maybe I'll headline it as like the inner game of business, right? Was that specifically with salespeople or aspiring salespeople, or was it with owners, CEOs as well? And if it was with the owners and CEOs, founders, what was the work there that you were doing?
So I specialize in founder-led sales. So it's like the founder is the salesperson. And because you're in this sort of, again, this identity formation phase of like, what are we even? We have this technology, we have a couple ideas, we have maybe a mission that we want to pursue in this general area. We have some patents, whatever, but what exactly are we going to do? The fact that has to iterate so often, you have to keep, because you're not sure and you need feedback from the market. And people will give you nice feedback, which you don't want. You don't want the nice, but that's really cool. That's really interesting. Wow, send me a deck and I'll get back to you after. You don't want that. You want real feedback. So you have to actually ask them the questions to get that and then be okay with the answers. They might tell you that what you've been working on is like, no one's going to pay for that. Great. Good. Let's know that so that we can adjust and move on to the next thing. And then how are they showing up, getting that feedback? And then they're at this intersection of the people working on the technology and the product and the commercial sales marketing side of it. And so they are the face of the thing too. And that comes with a certain baggage and burden or emotional kind of full situation. Yeah. So working with that. And then when they're like ready, all they want to do is hire a sales team so they don't have to do this anymore. And then sort of when they're ready, because they figured this out, how to then help. And then that transition from founder-led sales to hiring a team, and they have to now let go and trust other people to do it. And it's not the way they did it, and it's not as good as they did it. That also can trigger people in a lot of interesting ways, and working with teams to kind of hand that over.
Got it. Makes sense. And walk me through how you became interested in inner work or inner world, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, in a nutshell, my whole story is one of a deep father wound. And I ultimately found my way to coming back to Judaism as a result of that. And lived in Israel, went to Mayanot for yeshiva, and after school and got more and more religious in college. I ultimately, again, long story short, turned God into a version of my own father, and then ended up in an emotionally abusive sort of religious trauma relationship of my own making by projecting all these things onto what God must be, and then snapped and ran away back from that, and have been slowly and, a longer, shorter way, walking one step at a time back, reintegrating and reappreciating aspects of Judaism. And the biggest accelerant in that, the biggest sort of dynamic shift, I think, is becoming a husband is big, but becoming a father, I think, has been huge. And specifically in looking at my son, who in the
You have one child?
I have two children.
Two children.
A 4-year-old and a 1-year-old.
Beautiful.
Who looks like me and has my eyes, and it's like uncanny, and just his energetically is also just a carbon copy of me. And looking at him and feeling this unconditional love for him, and just like my heart's exploding, and I would do anything for him, and it doesn't matter what he does. And I'm being on the giving end of that, even though I never felt like I was on the receiving end of that. This like light bulb moment of like, is that how God feels about us? Is that what we're supposed to think about how God feels about us? And so being able to relate to that of like, wow, really got me interested in parenting. And so I started learning a lot about reading all the parenting books and parenting methodologies. And there's a lot of different camps out there, and a lot of different people have a different, of course, axe to grind and agenda on what's supposed to do and how you're supposed to do it. But mostly in my community and with my friends, just like looking around at how people are interacting with their children and what seems to be working and what isn't. And there's this sense that people are trying harder than ever, spending more time and more energy, more attention on their children, mostly in an effort to not do what their parents did to them, whether that's spoken or not.
Yeah.
And in the process, there's just this tightness and anxious and anxiety that the kids are picking up on, and then it's creating these feedback loops, and like everyone's dysregulating. You'd walk into some of these homes and you're just like, it's just, you can feel the energy level up here all the time. And kids are screaming and tantruming, and parents are exasperated. And then people will come into my home and they're like, why is it so chilly? Like, what are you guys putting in the air here? And whenever our kids freak out, we're constantly de-escalating and figuring out how to kind of pull down and ground and come down from that. And so I'm like, what is that? And I realize it's the same avoda of trying to be a mensch and trying to be a better Jew and trying to, what I preach in sales. It's like this, it's all the same inner work of
regulation.
So I think step one is emotional regulation. Can you be in touch with your emotions, aware of them, flow with them, release them, healthful, all that? I think step two is emotional attunement. Once you can do that, then can you dial into the other person and your children? Right? Can you meet them where they are and resonate with them? And then I think when you have that, then you've got this skill of connection and human connection, which is, again, in all of those areas is going to help you.
Makes sense. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up outside Philadelphia.
Cool.
Yeah.
Not in a religious or...
Not in in the main line, in like a very affluent secular community.
Main line?
Of Philadelphia. It's like a suburban area that's just like I don't know, Westchester is to New York, or East Boca, but not the religious side.
I got you.
Yeah.
And how did you get interested in Judaism?
I
say secular, traditional?
Reform, Reconstructionist. We went to synagogue twice a year, and when I finished my bar mitzvah, we graduated from it. My parents stopped paying for the synagogue. We stopped going. It never really.
How many children were you?
I have a sister who's 2 years older than me.
Got it.
And that was like everyone I knew. Everyone did it, but it didn't mean anything to anybody. It was just a sort of cultural thing. And the parties of the bar mitzvahs is sort of a whole keeping up with the Steins kind of vibe. And then I was like an atheist, a very devout atheist, a well-read atheist. So I was into science and biology, and I read Dawkins and Hitchens and was very into the idea that there must not be a God, because look at all the evidence for that. And not only that, you're stupid if you believe that, and would argue with people all the time. And I went on a birthright trip my freshman year of college, a Mayanot birthright trip, and because it's a free trip to Israel,
right.
Why not? It's fun. Yeah, you go, do it.
I did it, yeah.
And we were at the hotel on a Friday night, and I'm like, keeping my distance from whatever's going on here. Like, when do we get to go back to the hotel and drink Gold Star and hit on girls? I don't, whatever. Like, this isn't what I want to be doing. And the rabbi kept like pushing me, like, go kiss the wall. And I'm like, I don't want to kiss the wall. It's whatever. And I did it. And I blacked out and had this out of body spiritual experience, and the madricha had to come like collect me 2 hours later because like the bus is leaving, and I just like couldn't talk. I had no idea what happened. I was weeping uncontrollably. I was like, what was that? And God zapped me, and I then wanted to continue to pursue what that was. And for me, the vehicle and the connection for that was Torah, was like books, learning about it, and sort of the intellectual sophistication of Judaism. Really.
So how do you explain that today? That moment of touching the wall and My son asked me, 5-year-old, he asked me over Shabbos, he said, when are we going to go to the last wall standing? And I said, what is the last wall standing? And my wife explained to me that he understood that as a reference to the Kotel. Okay. The last wall standing.
The final wall. It was unexplainable. It was like, it made no sense. I didn't care about it. I didn't prepare for it. I didn't want it. I was anti it. And, this idea that you could like feel that way, A, and B, that there's things that are unexplainable, that are beyond you. And then, it's happening like here, right? Like at God's house. So I was very curious about it. It was this crack, right? Sometimes you just need a crack. And we talked about medicine. I think that sometimes you just need a puncture for some light to get in, and then it can start moving things around. And it was just, I don't know. So it's also for me feeling that obviously Hashem wanted that to be, Hashem wanted me to be on this path, and he had to like make it happen in that way. So it feels very sort of intimate and purposeful, and sort of being called to.
Personal.
Yeah.
What was the first start? You said it was an intellectual pursuit. How did that what was the first book you pulled up? What was
the first book was, Gil Locks? He lives in the old city. He's like, he was an old hippie, Baal Tshuva. He had a book called There Is One, and it's just like a series of vignettes about unity of God. And I remember reading the rabbi gave it to him. He had it, I think, like in his backpack or something. So I just like read it overnight in the hotel and then gave it back to him the next morning. And he was just like, "You read this?" Yeah. And then from there, just Tanya, and I think Tanya really became sort of the starting point. Yeah, just this like inner landscape of who we are and how we work, and that we're not IFS talks about how we're not like a mono mind. We have sort of multiple perspectives within us, and the Alter Rebbe said that before, and I think that in confluence of like psychology and religion, and the idea that our inner world is a reflection of what and who God is, just really appealed to me, and I just was hungry for more.
So you stayed in school?
Yes, stayed in school, did a whole year abroad at Hebrew U my junior year, and just kept going back to Israel. I got like internships, just like every opportunity I had to go back to Israel or to have a learning experience. And there's so many good free ones for kids, right? They're all trying to like, all these kibbutz organizations are just like, we'll pay for you to come. And great, cool. And then when I graduated, much to my parents' chagrin, I enrolled in Minot full time.
How many years were you there?
2.
Got it. And it sounds like from earlier in the conversation, you went pretty hardcore.
Quickly. I had what they call Baal Tshuva syndrome. Like just had I had a beard and a black hat and was fully in on it. In what I ultimately realized now was a very unhealthy way.
I'd like to dive into it because I've been coming closer to Judaism over the last few years, and I find that my approach has been a lot slower. Than I see others go. Like you mentioned the tzitzis. When I decided to wear tzitzis, I was like, I'm gonna wear it on Shabbos, and then from there I went to the podcast. Then sometimes when I'm giving a class at the House of Moore, or talking about something that's Torah based, then I'll also put it on. But it wasn't like, oh, tzitzis is real, let me put it on 24/7, right? So kind of holding that tension between those two. It could be real, and it doesn't mean that I'm going to move to it every day, and it doesn't mean that I'll ever move to it every day. It's just it's kind of where I am in the process. But I don't know that I've seen it. Like I'm sure I've seen it. I don't have a good model for that kind of return towards Judaism. I have more of this, the model that you're describing. Like people go like boom, 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 like real quick. So hearing you talk about some of the pitfalls of it could be helpful to me.
And I first heard you speak at that event at the House of Moore with Michal Marsky, and like I also don't think there's that many models of it. And hearing you talk about it in that way and answer those questions was like I was so drawn to. Hearing you brought it out, you like bevorned a question that no one asked, or you're just like, you might say, if I believe all this I just said, then why aren't I X, Y, Z? It's like I continue to sort of think that or struggle with that. Like, if this is true, right, then why aren't I doing it? And I think answers then and were very, very compelling. That's also what drew me to want to talk to you more.
Do you remember what I said many things that night, but what stuck out from what I said?
Two things. One, you quoted, I think, letters from the Rebbe, a bunch of them where he told people to like not go so fast and to do it at your pace, and synthesize that with, I think, this. I don't specifically remember. You said a lot of things, but I think that it was this idea that it's like it has to be, or how I heard it maybe, is it has to be like panimi. It has to be real, and it has to be yours, and it has to be internalized. And if you're sort of just like spiritually bypassing yourself by just taking on all these things, then it's that bypassing. You never dealt with the underlying thing, right? And so like if our goal is doing this from ourselves fully as an authentic person, like becoming that person, then you gotta involve your whole self, and parts of it resist, right, and are not there. And so bringing it along with kindness and compassion and moving towards it is probably what God ultimately wants, even though that isn't what you hear very often.
Right. So, okay. So before we go there, because I have my own experiences on it, my own experience and my own approach to it. Obviously, I'm curious to hear the pitfalls of it, right? Because it sounded like you lived in that. You went black hat, full beard, very quickly. Yeah. Talk about some of the impacts on yourself, perhaps your relationships.
Yeah.
As well.
Definitely strained family relationships, but I think that was part and parcel of the whole thing. Like strained family relationships were what led me to this place in the first place. And I think a lot of it was running away versus running towards, right? And I think that a lot of people who show up, in my experience, there's the rare few exceptions who are just these like angel-y gems of human beings who stand out. But I think most of the Baal Tshuva, I don't even like the term because it means one thing in the Gemara and it's one thing we use it colloquially. A lot of the people who became more religious, who weren't brought up from that background, are running away from a different life more than they are towards this, I think. And that if that's where you are, then you're kind of unmoored, right? And you're like, and it's hard to do healthy, sustainable change or transformation in that place of avoidance. Right? You talked about, I think, in one of your more recent podcasts too, about like I know what I don't want, but it's hard for me to articulate exactly what I do want. But you're saying it's really important to be able to actually put kalim around, like, this is what I want. And if we're just moving away from what we don't want, then it's hard to hit the mark. I think that was maybe the meta thing. But there's also becomes like a competition, right? Of like, oh, well, he got a hat and they're doing this. And you think you end up in this system of like, the more you do, the more you're worth, right? And the more you are able to, right? God values mitzvahs, God's valuing Torah, God values this performance, and you got to learn how to do it. I was just talking with someone recently, and I was saying that like I remember I would dread Shabbos Mevorchim, where you like have to say all of Tehillim, and like the front people are like, and like, let's go hang out. Like, and first of all, the fact that you just take. Now I'm also just an appreciation for Tehillim. Like, you could take one pasuk of King David's like heart and bring on it the whole Shabbos, and so also just turning it into a thing to rattle through in an hour is its own issue. But I just forcing myself to just say all the words because you had to, and then like timing, you get faster and faster over time. Like, just the whole thing to me was about doing more stuff. Maisa Huiker, right? That's what it's supposed to be. Do it, right? Kabbalah, so who cares what you think? Just do it. And reinforce this very unhealthy view I had of God, of God's just standing there. I think you're right, a sadist, right? Like looking for you to just mess up or do more, like just waiting for you, keeping score and evaluating you on your performance, but you're never quite enough. And so you have to keep doing more to try to like earn God's approval. And that is a tough place to be.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of the, I mean, obviously you moved away from that, but you didn't move away from Judaism, right? So let's talk about some of maybe the pain that was caused internally. Let's start with internally, some of the internal pain that was caused from moving to too quickly, and then we can go into the theology of it.
I think like maybe just like the bookend of the Kotel story of like what made me decide to leave yeshiva and go back to the States and do things differently was we were sitting in the courtyard of the yeshiva. It was 2014, 15. Lebanon was shooting rockets. There were rockets. Someone was shooting rockets at us. And so there's a security lockdown policy. And anyone you don't know isn't allowed in the gates. Totally reasonable policy. So I'm sitting there, I think Shabbos morning, and some big fat chassid in a strimal shows up huffing and puffing and like, let me in. I'm just like, sorry, sir, given the situation, I don't know who you are. I can't do that, but calling me a shagets and like yelling at me and just so indignant and so irate and so nasty. And I was just like explaining to him, like, I don't know, sir. Okay, fine, I'll go ask if anybody else knows you. I said, okay, sorry, like, let me go. So I go in and the Rosh Hashiva comes out and he's just like, I'm so sorry. Do you know who that is? And oh my God, I'm so sorry. I was like, that guy's a jerk. That's how I know. That's who that is. Why is he so important that he can be the thing that clicked for me, which I think that I was ultimately pursuing but wasn't able to articulate, was I feel like there should be at least a linear correlation, if not more of an exponential correlation, between how observant you are and how committed to God you are and how much of a mensch you are. And if it just felt like that wasn't the case. And I'm looking all around me, especially living in Mea Shearim in this yeshiva, like people are not menschlich. There's not derech eretz. There's not I'm learning how to say Shabbos Mevorchim as fast as I can so I could be like this person, but they don't seem that. Do they have it that I'm looking for? Like what I want either? And I think the answer to me was no, which made me then want to sort of shift into pursuit of what is this thing that I'm looking for and who does have it? And how do I kind of embody that in my own life? Which didn't answer your question, I guess.
Well, it did just in terms of the disconnect, which I think is what many people experience. Like if it's supposed to be good, then why isn't it good? Years ago, I got completely obsessed with CrossFit, 15 years ago. For a few years, I was completely obsessed. And what hooked me was just seeing the fitness of the people who were there. I was like, wow, this is just different. Right? You come to this place and it's on concrete floor, basically, with this
handstand, walking. You're kind of...
But the place it didn't compare to a 24-hour fitness or one of these other, I don't know. I forget the different gym names, right? With very fancy equipment and locker rooms and saunas and everything else. Here was just a warehouse, mats on the floor, bars, and people yelling, ropes coming down from the ceiling. But the end result was fitness. And I think I don't know who it was, some comedian used to go, he's like, I walk into these health food stores, he's like, and it seems great, but the people are so overweight, they can barely breathe. Right? What am I getting? What's the end result here? And that was kind of the opposite, right? The two parallels of that is you can walk into one place and see unhealthiness and then walk into another place and see healthiness. I want more of this. So I think that certainly happens for many, right? My dad was about to remember him saying that he was shocked the further he got into Judaism, how much money controlled things and how disappointing that was for him when he kind of expected it to be the opposite, right? Coming in further and further, and he's like, oh wow, in this world it's he who has the money has the strongest opinion kind of thing, like that. And he's like, wow, it's really controlled by that. It shocked him, but not enough to bounce out, but enough to, say what's actually going on here? What's beneath it? What are the real values that are underpinning the society? So, okay, that I get, the disconnect. Talk about some of the troubled relationships, because that's where I see a lot of things fall apart, personally, a lot of things.
I talked about my father. My dad was so distraught about the whole thing that he, I went for a summer program before I was going to go. So I still had 1 year of college left. And he cut me off financially and was and then my parents were distraught about that. And then they ended up getting divorced for the second time. My parents got divorced, remarried, and then divorced again, which does a number on a kid. And then he they were fighting, and then he blamed me and being Jewish for it. So it's like, it wasn't, I think in a lot of those stories. And
oh, wow. Okay. It was an internal blame. Like you're actually blamed for it.
I was actually blamed for it, right? So I hear a lot of stories about, right. And I have seen people where they're, going into their parents' kitchen and yelling at their mom for not keeping a kosher house and like whatever. And just they're not being a mensch, right? And they're trying to impose this on people and like straining relationships with parents who are otherwise well-meaning and loving and kind and genuinely want the best for their children. It was not my experience because those were not my parents. So that almost made me entrench deeper, right? It's like, I hate you. And so like you disapproving of this only makes me want to do it more, right? And that became even more toxic, I think, ultimately.
So there was a rebellious fire to your...
It wasn't initially, but then it was like when it became something that was so hated by, this person that I ultimately wanted approval from and wanted to impress and was never going to get it, then I'm just was in that mode, then I'm all in on it.
What did your father mean when he said that your approach to religion is to blame for the separation of the second divorce between...
Because he thought that money and, should be sort of, I like could control you and I'm going to try to, it's my job to actively turn you away from this however I can. And my mom was more understanding and was just give him space and let him figure it out. And he's not bad. He's not killing anyone. He's not on drugs. He's not doing not, and that they were already fighting all the time. That was not, right. It certainly was not the reason. But I think for, my mom, his treatment of me in that situation might have been like the straw that broke the camel's back the second time.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was a source of conflict between them.
Yeah.
Got it. Your mom being more understanding of the journey and your dad being like, hey, which cult got my son?
Yeah. Right. And actually, so my Rabbi Moss, who is the head of Mayanot now and now has another yeshiva, and he's amazing, and I love him. He was always like, don't get the hat, don't get your beard, why are you doing this? Like he was very much trying to actively slow me, to your point of like a model of slowing down. That was not necessarily the other kind of ethos from but he was he couldn't directly tell me not to, but he was, it's especially in retrospect, not so subtly encouraging me to like slow down and not do all this. But the one way he was able to help me was he said there's a therapist who used to sort of work on staff who Moshe Feiglin mentioned on your podcast, Rabbi Malkin, who's a therapist now and sees a lot of the kids at the yeshiva. So I went and saw him. And I remember he actually asked me, like, what do you want? I think he said, what do you like? What do you like doing? Like, what makes you happy? What do you actually want out of life? And I could not answer the question. And that sort of rattled things for me a lot. He's like, right, why am I doing this? And then I felt like I had to. I have all these, the shoulds and I have to. So it's like, I wasn't even brought up this way. Why do I have all this baggage? This is new for me. And of my own sort of imposing. So it was ultimately, I think, a dark place and period, but, it was Torah ultimately and Judaism ultimately. And so something, like got implanted and some of it was there. And I never stopped putting on tefillin. I never ate pork or shellfish after that. Like, there were a lot of things I just like would do and would go to on the like high holidays and would, not eat and keep Pesach and like just little things that then became this nexus for like wanting to do more. And now I look back and I'm so glad that I had all that education and I know things I can learn and I can like do stuff because of that. Yeah. But at the time it was not about God or Judaism, or it was just a lot of trauma and dysregulation manifesting in a...
So it was a place to place all of those things.
Yeah. And it was convenient. It's sort of accentuated. It can bring them out and highlight, right? And there's high sort of correlation with obsessive compulsive, and Judaism was super conducive to that because you're supposed to be yes. Maniac in every little thing. So this whole scoring system and learning system and doing things to try to. This is a segula for this, and this is sort of like some sense of control, right? Ultimately, as I'm sure we'll talk about, the whole point is to, surrender control and realize you don't ever have a control. You never had any control, and it was all an illusion in the first place. But there's a whole other worldview of it where it's like I'm doing this and I'm saying this and I'm doing these to get these brachas and I have to do this and say this and write a letter to the Rebbe to get this because I'm trying to control God. And I think it like you can very much fuel that too. So and then obviously that doesn't work because you can't control God.
Right. I've this is one of my theories is how everything in it has the opposite. So you'll often find sometimes with a name will either like do exactly it or the opposite. So an example would be the Inflation Reduction Act, right? It's either going to reduce inflation or increase inflation, right? It's not going to do something else, right? It's going to do this thing or the opposite. I'm thinking of a different example. Let's say desire. Okay, so desire has the capacity to entrap us, enslave us, or it has the capacity to free us. Right, like both at the same time, right? Someone in a place where you spoke, I forget the name of the therapist, the rabbi therapist?
Rabbi Malkin, yeah.
Right, Malkin. So he asked you, what do you want? Right, which that question has the capacity to free you. Right, from where, what do you want? And it's like, oh, okay, so I'm here in this prison of sorts, right? I'm running away from my dad, from my past. I now have all these obligations and guilt, but that question has the capacity to free you. What do you want? It's like, okay, yeah, what do I want? Right, and someone get free. Or, yeah, it's like, what do I want? And someone can become enslaved to their desires, right? Which is, right, addiction is kind of the apex of that. And there are many others. Sex is great for connection and disconnection. Right? Money is great for creation and destruction, right? And I don't know, for me, like when I had this idea, like I wrote out a bunch, and you won't say that about many other things, that it has this has the opposite. Right, the desire, for example, I said has a capacity to free or enslave. It doesn't have the capacity for connection or disconnection. Right, you wouldn't say the same thing. You wouldn't say, "Oh, it has connection and freedom." No, like it's along those lines. So I thought about religion, that it has the capacity for like surrender or control. Right, it's like those two. So what you're talking about, like, those are the two poles. So here's this essentially like here's this tool, and this tool will help you in moments of surrender, right? Surrender and control to God, and then you can use it in exactly the opposite way. So, or what the Gemara says about Torah itself, which it says that Torah taken to the right could be the elixir of life, and taken to the left will be the elixir of death. And there again, we see the like life and death, right? Like both being. I could have said many different things about what Torah could be on the one hand, and what it could be on the other hand. It's like it can lead towards life or it can lead towards death. The Torah itself doesn't report of itself as, I don't want to use the word like absolute good, but it doesn't report of itself as like guaranteed life. Like you can have the Torah, and within it will be the capacity to choose life or choose death, and one can use all of the philosophy, all of the teachings, all of the books of the Torah to either move it towards life or move it towards death.
But I mean, also when it does testify about itself, right? It says all its ways are pleasant and paths are peace. But again, to the point, is that what we see? Is that right? And when you see that, then that's Torah. And when you don't see that, it's pleasantness and peace. Then it's something else. It's not.
Sure. Yeah. Meaning it testifies about itself that it could be turned sideways. Meaning that's what it says. It testifies about itself that it could be turned in a very destructive way. Where I found most on this is in terms of relationships. So I have a friend, for example, who's, it's funny you mention OCD because you see a lot of that get masked through religion. It's just a great place to put, which OCD is control at the end of the day. It's just on that spectrum of someone feeling a loss of control and wanting to find control, and then religion becomes a great place to put it. I had a relative who, when he was a teenager, was, it says when you wash your hands before bread, your hands are meant to be completely dry. So you'll often see someone take a towel, dry their hands, and then wash it. You see if you watch in very Orthodox communities, oftentimes before they wash their hands for bread, they'll actually dry their hands. They'll dry their hands, then they'll wash their hands.
Okay, and then dry them again. Obviously.
Yes, but the idea is that when you're washing your hands, it should be dry.
Okay.
It shouldn't have whatever moisture from another place. But our hands also do have a little moisture, right? At all points in time, there's a little bit. It keeps us alive. So I had a relative who was so, it was so important to him to dry his hands that he got to the point where he's chafing his skin from how well he dried it. And I don't think anyone ever, I think in those circles it was viewed as someone who was being very observant in the mitzvahs, for someone saying, hey, like, this is OCD, you've locked the house, you've just like locked and unlocked it 27 times. Like, if he was doing anything else other than something that could be, I don't know, like blessed.
You could praise as like, wow, how machmir you are, right?
Exactly.
How chesed. You're like, yeah.
It's like, this is clinically OCD. Your hands are chafed. This is bad for you. It's actually bad. So, and no one asking that question until like years later, going to a therapist. He's dealing with stomach issues. Therapist saying like, hey, this could be anxiety and OCD, and right, getting some help for that, getting some treatment in that in that domain. So, so I have a friend who's been becoming more and more religious, and it's been creating conflict between him and his wife, him and his kids, and things like that. And I share with him, I said, like, if Shabbos is important, it is important to you. Like, is it only important to you? Is it also important to your kids? Because if you do it this way, your kids are going to hate Shabbos. Like, that's going to be the net effect. So somewhere in there, we have to balance the two. We can hold that it's important, and even holding that it's extremely important will get us to be more, I don't want to say moderate, but more relational. In our approach to it.
Relational versus transactional, which is what we talk about like in sales coaching all the time, right? Is it like, am I trying to get my end imposed on you? Am I trying to get my way here, or am I in a relationship with you? Is that primary? And if I do that correctly, I might have some influence, right? And influence is very different than control.
Right. Yeah, someone may see this, to your point, and say, I like this. What's this guy doing?
Yeah. You're drawing them towards you.
Yeah.
Right. Which is, again, that with the like whole parenting piece, I think, right? It's if you love God and you love Shabbos and you love davening and you genuinely love these things, and it's real and it's panini and it's not a performance, it's genuine presence, your kids will be drawn after that. Right? It's like, we want our kids to do these things, and that's been my philosophy. And so my wife is not observant and very appreciative of what I do and how I do it, and gives me a lot of support and space, but herself is sort of like not necessarily wanting to do a lot of that. And we had a talk about raising the kids, and I said, my goal, I actually genuinely believe you can't, in today's day and age, and maybe the theology of it is another thing we could sort of talk about, I don't think you can impose anything on anyone. I think if you're trying to control your kids to make them be religious, it's not going to work. And I think the only thing that will work, this is sort of, I'm staking my my kids' future on, is that they have a choice in it, and that they choose to do it because it's something that they see as ultimately good and that they want to do. And so she's like, great, I agree, cool. And that's easy to say when you have no kids, or she's pregnant. Now my 4-year-old is I go to shul on Shabbos every week now because he wants to go. Like, I would go sometimes, not go, whatever. And he's like, we have to go. And sometimes there's birthday parties or other things or plans. He will literally, we give him the option. Do you want to go to this birthday party at the gym and there's cake? Or he's like, no, I want to go to shul and have cholent. I'm like, okay, amazing. Because he wants to, because he loves it, because I think he knows that I love it. And he's like, that draws him towards it. That's right. The most effective way to sell anything too is to genuinely believe that what you have is of value. And you don't need to tell people that or make them see that. They can see that by looking at you if you believe that.
Correct.
And how do you work on that? You have to work on yourself.
Yeah. One of the stories that made an impression on me was, because there was probably about 10 plus year time where the only mitzvah I was careful about was tzedakah, I would say. That's the way I describe myself. And I saw a family who became Baal Teshuvos very, very quickly, had a number of kids. And then there was one of their children, I don't even know the exact story, but I heard it from enough of the siblings to understand that it was like a bomb that exploded through the family, where one of the children was in a marriage and having some trouble in that marriage, went to a rabbi, and they were very unimpressed with the way the rabbi dealt with it. And then the entire family became non-religious, right? So here you have Baal Teshuva in an instant, not, right, like maintaining this life for 20 plus years, one experience happening, it's shaking the entire foundation of their belief system, and no one's religious left. So what does that tell you? That the 20 years weren't actually built on a solid foundation. Mm-hmm. Very similar to what you shared about your parents. A healthy marriage doesn't get destroyed by a disagreement over a child's path, right? It obviously wasn't that strong if something like that could blow it over. So kind of the same thing here is if we move too quickly through something, if we're running away, if we're rebelling, if we're keeping up with the Steins, is how right? Whatever it is, but in the Jewish way.
Yeah.
Right, keeping up with the Horowitzes, maybe. Like, okay, like, am I reading faster? Am I doing more? Is my beard long enough? Then it's not actually a solid foundation. It can very quickly be blown over by some experience.
Mm-hmm.
Right, that event with their child not being received by a rabbi tells me that they had a erroneous perception of what a rabbi is and the role they were supposed to portray and what Judaism was. All of it. There was something they were believing that wasn't true. So when they experienced that, they experienced mass disillusionment. Well, you can only experience mass disillusionment if you're believing a lie. Had they gone through, Mosai had like gone through step by step, like what is this? What is that? What is this? What is that? Fully integrating each one of their steps into their human being, it could not have been blown over by a rabbi who said something funky.
I have a close friend who is becoming more and more interested in Judaism, and he was asking me recently about davening and how do you daven and like what are the different kavanas and how do you think? I was like, okay, I made this mistake, so I'm going to help you not make this mistake. The most common word, the single most repeated word in the siddur is ata, you. And the only kavana that you should be working on right now is I am talking to God. And God is listening and cares. Like, just if you can sit with that, if we can crawl before we walk, before we run, before we try to fly, like that, like if you can just believe that you're actually standing in front of God, God is hearing you and listening to you. And that even if you're mumbling words you don't understand, like a child is, right? When your kid is babbling at you, I have a 1-year-old who's trying to learn to talk right now. So like, you respond, you babble back, like, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, cool. Like there's that connection. And we try to jump levels. We try to jump to, mystical intentions. And I'm going to try to be Hisponanus on this. And it's like, but you actually believe that you're talking to God right now and God is listening? Because if not, all that other stuff is not real. Like that is meant to be built on top of like layer by layer. But the first foundation is you believe that when you daven, God is Shemaya Tefillah. Like, and that's actually happening. And if you don't believe that's happening, like, let's not get caught. We're all so, I think, just drawn up in like doing more and accomplishing more and achieving more and checking boxes and going to the next level. And it's like, can we just sit with the foundation first? And it's so important. So I'm trying to, help other people, not, but also I'm not convinced that maybe people have to make those mistakes and learn for themselves ultimately.
Yeah, it's possible. They do need to, but I think the purpose of this is just like, is it a mistake or not? Like, that's what we're trying to explore. Not whether someone needs to. Yeah, certainly. Maybe they need to. But there's a world of a difference between someone doing something and saying, okay, I'm figuring it out. And this is the epitome of holiness right there. Very different things. So I think we can call a spade and say what it is. You mentioned your relationship with your wife in this regard. So you met her when you were at what stage of your journey?
I left yeshiva, came back to the U.S. and got a job in consulting in Philadelphia, where I'm from, live in the city. And on my first day of work, I was assigned a peer mentor, and it was my wife. And she was like, took me out to lunch. I call that our first date. She does not like that, right, me? And we were really close friends for a long time. And I was sort of in a phase of, I didn't have fun in college because I was being religious the whole time. And now I'm like making money and in a city and I'm young. And so I was just like, I'm going to have a lot of fun and do a lot of things. And she was sort of a friend in that, and like, saw me being a wild boy for a while. And then our friendship was so solid and so close. And then as I started being like, all right, this isn't it, whenever I'm on this search for whatever happiness looks like. That was fun, but meaningless and not really like the depth that I want. And so as I started to kind of pursue that more and like, what do I want in relationships? What do I want in like intimacy? And I'm just like, this beautiful Jewish girl who's like my closest friend is just like, that like, oh, it's right in front of me the whole time. And so when we did start sort of becoming more involved, it like accelerated very quickly because we also we knew each other's parents, we knew each other's families. We were already so close. But and at that point I kept a fairly kosher kitchen in my apartment and put on tefillin every day. And even then she was just like, all right, well, what are we going to do? Because I'm not into that necessarily. So we sort of had a lot of early discussions around like, what do we want? What do we value? What's our life going to be like? And that's been really helpful to this day because there were certain like foundational principles, like that one about choice. We're not arguing necessarily about where the like kid, where my son is, because we talked about the value of choice, except actually it came up recently. My nephew's birthday is going to be on Shabbat, and I was like, I think it's important that he goes. I was like, what about, let's let him choose. And she's like, you know what he's going to choose? He's going to choose. But like, so it was a little bit of a source of tension with us, and I'm not sure. And I actually spoke with a close friend, and he said something not dissimilar to what you were sort of talking about.
Which is?
Go to shul for an hour and then leave early and go and like make your wife happy, and it's her sister and it's her sister's kid. And I was like, really, what? And these guys like, he's like a religious guy. I was like, really? Like, that's what? I thought you were telling us you have a lifetime of figuring this out, and lay out. Like, don't. I was like, yeah, but my son wants to choose it. And he's like, sure, but you don't want your wife resenting that at all in any way. And navigating that has been interesting because it's becoming increasingly important to me, and now to my son, which then makes it more important to me. And I think that for her, and she'll even be the first to admit, she is becoming very, very, very slowly more open to it. And sometimes I'm sort of like, a kasarun in me is I won't see that and be like, oh, you know, if I'm to my own philosophy, I just preach. If I'm really loving this and doing this and believing this and it's so authentic, like, shouldn't have an effect on you. And she's like, it is. It's not necessarily at the rate that maybe you want it to be. And that's really fair feedback for me.
Right. Yeah, I think one commitment that I've made myself, like, I will not fight with my wife over religion. Like, we will absolutely not get into a fight over this. I think that I thought a lot of this. I think a lot about the 12 steps. So there's the 11th step is sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God, right? So we use prayer and meditation to improve our consciousness of the contact, right? It's there, but become conscious of it. Praying only for the knowledge of God's will for us and the power to carry that out, right? So there's only two things in the 12 steps it says to pray for. Pray for the knowledge of God's will for us and the power to carry that out. And it's funny because this thing that you said about like the most common word in prayer is ata. I learned in 12 steps is where I learned about this dynamic of a personal relationship with God, which actually started with me venting a tremendous amount of anger towards God, because that's where I was in the relationship. Where I was I said, like, I don't believe God exists, but if he does, I hate him. So I had to go with, okay, if he does, I hate you, and I had to express that, and then choose to believe that the God I would want to serve can handle my hate or my anger or my confusion or my, I don't know, whatever it is, right? All of that stuff. But I'm going to go back to this point about praying only for the knowledge of God's will for us. And I think, like, it sounds so presumptuous to know God's will for us. And I know, like, Torah's like, well, we know God's will, just read all the commandments. And it's like, no, it's actually not that simple. It's not at all that simple. Just to say, like, just do this. Well, like, if we just do that, like, there was a story of, I read it this past week. It's a famous story of, I think Zusha, he had a brother, Zusha Vanapali, and his brother, Sholi, what's his name? Elimelech, what? Okay, so there were two brothers. We'll see if we get that in. There were two brothers, Zusha and Elimelech, and somehow they ended up in prison together.
You just told that on the podcast. Your
Who
last
did?
one. Robert Gardner with the bucket.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was just talking about.
Oh,
I was just listening to it.
Okay, good, fine. So I read it again last week. Fine, I read it again last week, and the punchline. I'll say the story for those who didn't hear it. So they somehow end up in prison, and there's a bucket of there's no toilet, right? There's just a place for anyone who needs to go to the bathroom to use. So one of the brothers is so upset that he can't pray because there's a bucket there. And he says, well, the same God who said, so the other brother, I think it was Zusha, says to his brother, he says, the same God who said, I want to connect with you with prayer, now wants to connect with you without prayer. Right? He's the same God who says, don't pray when there's a bucket of feces in the room. So he got so excited that now it's like, wow, we're connecting to God in this new way that I never had this opportunity before to connect with God through prayer, through non-prayer. So they started dancing from excitement, and the other prisoners also started dancing, and eventually the guard comes in and says, what is all this excitement? So they share what happened. He says, well, if this bucket is making you so excited, we're going to take it out. So you take it out, and then they can pray again, right? But that idea of, like, yes, God wants us to do this thing, right, of pray. And then sometimes there's a bucket of feces in the room, right? But it's not always as obvious. It's like, in this moment, is that the move? Like, is that the perfect move? When I decided to start keeping Shabbos, and it's so intrinsic to us. The other day I was talking to a friend who mentioned that he won't eat pork out, he won't eat other things, but he'll eat meat without butter. Okay, like this is thing. And instantly my mind went to how inappropriate that is. But then I'm like, my kosher itself is not at all to any standard of, some stats, like more than it was, but it's not to like a Shulchan Aruch standard of kosher by any means. But how quickly my mind was to jump to assume that guy's wasn't okay, right? It's like we do this, and then catching myself and saying, like, this is ridiculous. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous that my mind would even think that. But there are these voices in our head that sometimes have to be quieted and say, like, hey, I was in that place several years ago where I was eating non-kosher meat. Things I do today, someone else would look at as not kosher by their standard. And like to just like reduce the intensity of that voice. There's it's a saying, with religion, everyone who does more than me is a fanatic, everyone who does less than me is a heretic. Right? It's kind of like that's instinctual to us. So when I started, for example, with Shabbos, I started putting my phone away and other things and being more careful with Shabbos. My wife kept asking me, like, do you want me to keep Shabbos? Do you want me to keep Shabbos? And I was like, it's like, I am not getting into a fight with her over religion. Like, that's absolutely not happening. Meaning, to me, it's so clear to me, like that, like God does not want me fighting in his name. There's no way. So to oversimplify it and say, like, I know what God wants in the moment, there may be a bucket of feces. And it's like, there may be. And for me, that's the bucket of feces. The bucket of feces would be if I just go and like steamroll Shabbos through my family, that would be me praying with a bucket of feces and saying, this is what God wants, is what God wants, is what God wants. Like, I can't imagine that. And I kept telling her, like, no, I don't. Like, I don't. There was a voice in my head that did. I'm not saying it didn't exist. But the stronger voice was, no, I don't. I was not, like, 2 months ago. Like, why would I want you to? I want you to do the same thing I did, right? Take the time, take your choice. And if you want to take something on, take something on. And then eventually, my wife, when she gets pregnant, she kind of slows down. Her whole world slows down. And she starts thinking. And she's like, okay, from herself, she's like, I'm going to start putting my phone away on Shabbos. And I remember once, like, we went to a hotel for Yom Tov. I think I shared the story once on the podcast. Went to a hotel once for Yom Tov, and she like was scrambling, trying to figure out like the door and the key and everything else. And I saw her wrestling with it in that moment. And I knew in my head that if she tells herself she can't do this right now, she's going to go to a place of, okay, I took on too much, and just throw it all away. So I said to her, I never heard you say you're going to keep Yom Tov. Like, I never heard you say that. Like, that was not something you said you're going to do. So she's like, oh, right. So I said, listen, if you got to figure it out. Also, it's like a new set of circumstances. You made a decision, like living in the house and everything else. Here you're like on the 11th floor of a hotel, right, trying to figure out what to do. You're figuring out your key. You're stumbling. It's a 3-day Yom Tov for a 2-day ordeal. This is much different than you originally thought when you made the commitment. You didn't necessarily make this one. Like, slow down, figure out what you want to do. That's what she did. Like, in the moment, she's like, okay. So she relaxed for that. And then I saw, like, the next Shabbat, she was able to keep it. It didn't become, or keep it in her way, right? And still, it's not perfect. It's not perfect. Like, someone looking from the outside would say she doesn't, right? But for her, she's on an upward progression towards it. So I think that these things, that's what I found in my own life, is like like praying for the knowledge of God's will for us, like that, like to so deeply understand what is God's will for us in this moment. If we try to oversimplify it too much, I think God gave us a very complex game in front of us, like a really complex game, and we're constantly on a razor's edge. And to just simplify it, like God wants Shabbos and everyone to keep Shabbos, and we're going to burn the village down until everyone keeps Shabbos, or that kind of intensity. Like, no, I don't think it's that simple. I don't think it's that simple. I think we're playing a much more complex game where we're being measured on multiple factors at the same time. And it's like, did you get the razor's edge? Did you know there was a bucket of feces in the room and it was not the time to pray?
So what do you think, like, how do you feel like you know when you're praying for God's will of you, for you, what that is, what that feels like?
I think what it feels like is humility, right? That's what it feels like. Bill Maher had this documentary, Religulous, and at the end he's like, it was kind of ridiculous, his documentary, because he took like the most extreme, he took like the Natura Carta, he took like the most extreme aspects of religion and showed like, this is religulous, this is ridiculous, right? Look at all this stuff. And I'm like, show someone who's living, who's in business world, succeeding and maintaining, Shabbos and kosher and a life with his family, and then call that ridiculous. I don't think you would. But he made a very important point at the end, which he's like, I'm not saying it's false. I'm not saying that. It's just where others preach certainty, I preached out. And that's what I think the point is that to be so certain, is, I don't understand how people arrive at that like level of certainty. Like what I'm certain about, that's like when you say like never say never, that's what I'm certain about, is like I'm certain that when I hear that certainty, there's something that's off about it. How could you be so sure? How could you be so sure there's not a bucket in the room right now while you're choosing to pray? Like this is a much more nuanced game than just like boom, this, that, the other thing. And I think we need to be, to me it sounds like that. There's a great saying. It says, the trouble with the world is that those who know, like intelligent people are nuanced, and stupid people are
confident.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Something like that. I forget the exact saying, but that's the point. So it's kind of like that thing. Like when I hear that, it's like, okay, how could you be so sure of God's will for you in this moment? Like where do I get the audacity to run over my wife or my kids saying like, this is what God wants? It was like, because it says in the Torah like this. Yes, it does. It does. I'm not taking that away, but there's also context. There's also situations. There's also a bucket of feces in the room sometimes. Like we can't be so sure. And if Shabbos is important, like I said, why would I run over the next generation of potential Shabbos observers?
In a given situation, if you're feeling like you want to know God's will for you, like what's that internal process look like or feel like? Because you're not putting a letter in a thing and opening it to a page and saying this is God's will for me, right? That's one avenue. I think about this a lot in terms of like, you talk about personal relationship with God, right? And like, what do we used to have sometimes rabbis would say something along the lines of, like, if you're feeling like you're having like a spiritual experience, you're not. Like it's yeshus, it's delusion.
It's what?
It's yeshus, it's delusion, right? Like you're not. Like God's not communicating with you through your feelings. And I don't know. So I'm curious, like if you're asking God, what's your will for me? And then there's different voices and different things. Like what does it internally look like to triangulate that and feel like you got an answer to that question?
Right, I get it. So I'll answer with this thing, and then I'll go to the kind of couple times in my life that I felt that feeling, because it's uncommon. But I think that the main thing is not. I think the emphasis is not praying for the knowledge of God's will for us. Like the highlight is not on God's will for us.
Okay.
I think it's on the praying for. Right, that we're in this constant. Like, what are we praying for? We're praying for two things, or really one thing. We're praying for the knowledge of God's will for us, understanding that is so elusive. So when someone says like, this is God's will for me, right? Like, I don't know, just the other week in the parsha, he had Korach. Korach was not, he believed he was right. He absolutely believed he was right. According to some commentaries, he had a vision that Samuel would come from him, and Samuel was on the level of Moshe and Aaron combined, right? So he understood that he was operating with some sort of certainty. And then he was surrounded by 250 sages, very, very knowledgeable very, very knowledgeable people, leaders of their tribes, right? So you're that's what it is carrying it, I think, with that uncertainty. And I think the damage is not in getting it, like the damage to others, right? In terms of the religious damage to others that I think many people experience, which I think violates one of the 10 Commandments, which is not carrying God's name in vain. Meaning, how do you get to use God's name in that moment? This is what God wants. Like, I know for sure. Versus like just carry it with a little bit of gentleness. It's like, I may be wrong, with a little humility. Like, I don't know for sure that this is I don't know for sure that this is the case. So, well, I mentioned that with my wife. There was a moment where a couple of times where I shared, like, hey, this I think should be done. And in those cases were both, and it's what I share with myself, is that, there's a prophecy, I think it's from Malachi, there's a prophecy, it says that there will come a time when God will stop being referred to as master and instead be referred to as husband. So, and I think it's referring to like the footsteps of Mashiach, which according to many people we're in that, whatever the footsteps mean. Is it 200 years or, one day? But that period of time, right, is God will stop being viewed as a master and start being viewed as a husband. And I think like in that relationship of intimate relationship, if I was to tell you, right, a master says, do this, 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 do that. And then if you don't do those things, you fall short. In a relationship, we may say, like, hey, here are a lot of love languages. You can buy flowers from me every Friday. You can have set aside times for intimacy. We can have times for a walk. We can have vacations every once in a while. And all of these are kind of pathways to connection. And we can know it. Like, I can give you a whole list that will be great for you and your spouse, and you can give a whole list that will be great for me and my spouse. But the one thing that will be damaging to either is if I say I'm going to do something and I don't do it. So, for example, if in a relationship I tell my wife, I'm going to buy you flowers every week for Shabbos, great connection is established there. And if I do it, connection is reinforced there. But if I don't do it and I don't address it, or it just stops becoming something that I do, now I've created rupture in the relationship. And that's what the way I kind of approach my pathway, like coming closer to Judaism and coming closer to God through Judaism, is tzitzis is a pathway of connection. Okay, if I say I'm going to do it, then I better do it. Right? That's like if I say, okay, I'm going to take this on. And I have a story of the Rebbe to illustrate this point, where I feel like I saw it, but I've never been able to recreate it. So maybe I heard it. Where there was I think the guy's name was Weiss, wealthy guy in California, which went to the Rebbe and mentioned that he wants to grow his beard. There was some sort of, I think Taisva says that people don't have both, wealth and like knowledge of Torah. Like, it doesn't exist anymore. Like, it's kind of like one or the other. And he says he wants both. And some conversation ensues about a beard. And towards the end of the conversation, the Rebbe says, I think he made 2 points, but one was like, make sure you discuss it with your wife. Like, have this conversation with your wife, and have this conversation with your wife before taking it on, right? And you're talking about someone who I believe, like the Rebbe's approach, was that a beard is real, right? And some of these heterim that others relied on, he didn't rely on. But he didn't rush in the moment to say, like, hey, just grow your beard. Go home, discuss it with your wife, right? Make sure this is something you're ready to take on. And I believe he went on to grow the beard. But that kind of sensitivity versus absoluteness that is shown in that story, I think, is what I'm talking about.
I'm asking because I think that, like, I find in my client work and with myself that usually we have a lot of knowing. Like, we know, right? It's more of a feeling, right? It's people come with I should help me navigate this deal, or help me navigate this conversation, or this relationship, or this, I could do this, or I could do that, and this happened, and that happened. It's like, if you're able to peel back the layers, it's like, what do you think you should do? And they immediately start discounting those. Just like, what? Usually I find that there's like, oh, okay, I know what I should do. But it's that knowledge, it's certainty, right? It's energetically different than we're steamrolling everyone. We're doing it, right? We're amped up. We're hyped up. We're doing it. It's like okay. Like there's an acceptance. There's a feeling, I think, that is just softer and gentler and more relational, where sometimes you do, I feel like, get your prayers answered, or you get that sort of intuitive guidance of what you're supposed to do, and it's your gut instinct, and we're just so quick to discount that sometimes. And I think that, like, just learning to trust our inner compass in that way is for me, it's been, I think, something that's been really helpful, and helping others tap into that so they can navigate some of these situations a little more trusting themselves.
Yeah, I've been reading some like Carl Jung's students. Carl Jung's work has always been hard for me to understand, but some of his students' work, kind of a little bit more explanatory. And I believe he was of the opinion that everyone has a knowing, like a knowing of what is wanted for them, which I can certainly say for myself, like there's been a knowing at various times. But I would say the 2 times that I felt it most strongly was I knew with absolute certainty that God did not want me watching porn. Like that was absolute. I had this level of conviction around that I've felt about very few things. And then everything that supported it, it sounds like, oh, God does not want me to watch porn. I don't mean it in that way. I meant like he wanted me to throw everything at this. Like this, like he absolutely did not want me doing this thing. Like the time was over. And even when I looked at it, there were times where I say often to people who want to get past addiction, there are 2 letters to write. There's a letter of anger towards God, right? Because usually someone is carrying that, and the other is a thank you letter to porn. So I think porn helped me through my childhood years, right? Through my teenage years, like for sure, it may have saved my life. So I'm not going from this place of like everyone must stop watching porn in this moment, even though I think objectively it's like it has a bad for many and for others, but I also think that it saved me for a period of time. But then there was a moment where I was like, God does not want me watching porn. And then those things that were supportive of that, I did. And those things which were not, I didn't do. So I made business deals based on that. Like, hey, if this arrangement is going to support my ability to stay away from porn, I'll do it. If not, then I'll move away from it. When I went to meetings on Friday or drove on Shabbos to meetings, like any of those things, my understand, I wasn't keeping Shabbos. So it wasn't as if the choice was driving or not driving, but I'm saying like those, I didn't think in those moments, and I still don't think today that God wanted me going to shul. Eventually I actually looked at it as my shul. I bought a house 2 blocks away from the meetings I went to in South Beach, and I was going always, and I would say like, this is my shul, this is my place of prayer, this is where I go. So that was like, I carried that with certainty. I don't think that God wanted me like in that moment to do all of these many things. And I think where a lot of us get tripped up is there are many laws in Judaism around a person being sick, right? And that a sick person, like focus on the illness. And then many of us are sick and we don't know we're sick. Or we see others we don't know, which is a much higher level of sickness. Right? When someone's sick and they don't know they're sick, that's a much more serious level of sickness. So some of us, we're treating ourselves as if we're actually normal people, that we're subject to all of these laws when we're not. Like we may be obsessive compulsive, we may have anxiety disorders, addictions, all of these things many of these things rise to the level of sickness, actual sickness. And I'm not giving like a halachic opinion, I'm giving more of like a sickness opinion, like this is sick, right? My mind was not well at all. I was not well when it came to these subjects. And I needed to throw myself in with the same intensity as someone who had a pneumonia. And I bring that example because in the book of AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, it recommends to wives, like treat your husband the way you would someone with a pneumonia. I think it's the example. Like, anyway, I've said a lot of different things, but did it answer your question?
Yeah, and I wonder, is that a segue into a conversation around medicine? If there's all this sickness.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, why not?
Or I mean, I guess, and that just that point about 2 things. One, I think that the like IFS model of therapy, also one of the approaches I like about identifying sort of this part as a protector or a firefighter or I'm a manager, is that this behavior, right? It's I'm a people pleaser, I'm this, I'm that, and there's this inner loathing towards it, or like, right, I'm so critical of myself, I hate that voice that doubts me, or I hate my self-sabotage, or I get so angry at my kids when they ask for these things, and I hate myself for it. There's so much shame, and there's so much, especially dads will do like, I lose my temper, I lose my patience with my kids, and then I feel awful about it, and the feeling awful is almost worse than the thing itself. And one of the, I think, most helpful beginning points therapeutically also is just seeing it as this thing, this behavior, for like personifying it in the way that IFS does can be helpful. But I think the core ethos that I try to tap into is it exists to protect you from something, to help you with something. Like, it serves a purpose, right? If we can understand what its purpose it is and why it's so entrenched in that behavior, because it's ultimately trying to protect you, right? So if you're coming at it with anger and loathing and disgust and wanting to eradicate it and get rid of it or bypass it or kill it or whatever, it's just going to perpetuate, right? But if we can look at it as, oh, it's right, it has pneumonia. It's like but it's there because it was trying to help me. That sort of compassion just softens the whole approach, and then kind of creates an opening into relating to yourself differently, which I think is the beginning of sort of starting to heal some of those things.
If we were to go into medicine from this conversation, where would we go?
Where would we go? You just talked about sickness, and then it just makes me think about medicine. I mean, when we were talking briefly, like, I think that I asked you, because I'm super curious about people. Are the experiences themselves healing? Is it the after? Is it integration? Is it sort of the container? Is it the community? Is it like what? How do we, and obviously something you care about and are interested in, and like, how do we make those experiences optimally healing for this sickness that we don't even know that we have sometimes?
Right. Many of us don't know.
Yeah.
Don't know we have. So like, what's your experience with medicine? Let's go there. Like, where are you at in the process? Like, how long have you been tinkering with it?
So my best friend in yeshiva was, he became very religious and stayed that way and got married at 23 and lived in Israel. And when I left, he came to my, we planned our wedding in COVID and didn't end up having it, and whatever, I had a smaller version of it. So I was going to have a bachelor party, but we had a bachelor party before my son was born. And I just wanted to like hang out with a bunch of my friends. And one guy shows up with a big bag of mushrooms, and my friend was there, and that was sort of his first experience doing something. It was not in a medicinal sense. It was totally recreational, fun sense of it. And it catalyzed a process for him where now, flash forward 5 years, he runs a above board psychedelic healing center in Colorado where it's legal, and he teaches trainings to other people to do that. So he's like deeply enmeshed in that world. And then so he has then sort of brought me around in the last couple of years to seeing the therapeutic potential of these medicines. And so I've been in therapy for ever. My first, like, as a kid, it was always my parents taking me to places to be like, fix my kid. And it was a lot of psychiatry, which was traumatic. And I wrote about, and I think I told you about. But then. So
that psychiatry story, like overly medicated, that was you?
That was me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, not just, right? Like, fix my kid. I'm not going to look at myself. I'm not, right? There's something wrong with my kid, but they're acting out. They must be broken. They must have some disease from the DSM that we can point to. And then there's a list of cocktail of drugs you could do, and you can keep adjusting it until you dial that in.
So you feel that as a kid, you were overly medicated, unnecessarily diagnosed?
Yeah, for sure.
And today you don't need those to function?
It didn't even in my like teen and years and all through college. Like, it just was, no. And I believe that in a lot of those cases, it's a lot of, and I wrote about with ADD and quoting Mate and all the complications around that it's a family systemic function of sort of the home dynamic where the kid's behavior is a symptom, a signal of something broken in this whole
Yes.
family relationship, and the whole family has to heal. So
Yes.
isolating the patient zero and drugging them is like not, I think, what we're supposed to be doing in this situation.
Right. It's kind of like exactly the opposite. Yeah. Gabor Mate talks about it in, forget his most recent book.
I know I know Scattered Minds, where we talked about ADHD specifically.
Right. But
Yeah.
his more recent, I don't know. Remember.
Okay.
The one he wrote with his son, like the pinkish one. I picture in mind.
Okay.
But
Um,
he talks about like this tribe, the Lakota tribe, I think the Lakota tribe, which when one member got sick, then they all thanked that member for exhibiting for like taking on the sickness that existed in the family. So number one was holding it, and number two was exposing it so that it can be dealt with. But it was viewed more as, hey, we are a family, and then this sickness is showing up in this one person. Thank you so much for...
because we're all connected.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, this is all ours to deal with.
Yeah. And Saras in the house too. It's so interesting too, right? Like when there's an infected house, and like how do you do it? And then you have to dig into the wall, and then there's gold in that wall potentially, right? But you have to sort of it's a signal that something's off, and then there's a reward at the end of that process, but there has to be a sort of the whole healing it's not just of the person, it's of the kind of the whole family system.
Right.
So, and you asked me earlier about like, what do I ultimately, driven to do, and why do I care about that kid stuff? To me, I think that sort of formative experience drives a lot of what I'm doing. And even if I'm helping someone with sales or business or parenting overtly, or their marriage, it's ultimately, I want to help people be the kinds of parents who will help those kids get the healing that they need, right? Because versus taking them to a psychiatrist, and it's a booming business. It's
right,
child psychiatry and specifically, and I just think that it's the parents need healing, not the kids.
Yes, that's been my experience, and on medicine there were many occasions where things with my children that were bugging me or that I thought was out of order, I was able to point it back to myself, make a change, and then see the change show up in the house. So I've tested this theory.
Yeah, I deeply believe that they are right. Whatever it is that they're bringing up in us is intentional. God is doing this because He's helping us. Right? They reveal something in us, or they show us something about ourselves that we still have to work on and heal. And to your point, the way we help them with it is by going inward and modeling it and figuring out how to do it ourselves, and being that sort of emotional anchor and co-regulating with them while they kind of figure it out is so much more ultimately effective and beneficial for everybody. Everyone benefits more. Like a whole family can change and transform versus making a zombie out of one child, which is often what happens.
Yeah, I've come across this idea a couple of times in Letters of the Rebbe, where he said that, talking to parents who are struggling with their kids, saying a family is one organism, and with healing you can either, if you look at one body, you can either heal the organ itself that's off, or you can heal around it. You can heal make them even stronger to be able to, pick up for the others and give that the opportunity to heal. So what he calls in his letters direct or indirect healing. And then he always points it back to the parents, because he says that in the body's organism, the father, I think, is considered the head, and the mother the heart. I think that's what it is, or his language was the Baal HaBayis and Akeres HaBayis, right? So effectuating healing in those organs are going to have a much more disproportionately positive impact on the entire organism. So multiple times when parents, I saw in at least 2 letters, when parents were struggling with children, the Rebbe advised them to focus on their own healing.
And the relationship with each other, right? The connection between the head and the heart is what,
Sure.
Right. And there's so much also research showing, right, that a parent, the marriage is the primary relationship in the home, which cascades outwards and influences all the other relationships and all the other people in it. So, which starts by working with the individual members. How did I get on this? Oh, therapy. So then I did end up finding, I had a therapist I liked in college, and then I worked with Rabbi Malkin for years and years and years. Even when I left Israel, he's still my therapist. And I think that I was at a point where, through my own reading and learning and introspection and journaling and diarying and therapy, I could articulate to you all of why I do what I do and why it was and how it connected to this childhood experience and this is where I want to be and this is how I'm not this and this is what's wrong with me and these are the issues and these are challenges. And like I just kept finding that I just kept going around and around and around. I would complain to him and just be like, I feel like we're here in the same place again. Right. These are these same situations, these same challenges. And then I went to Colorado and hung out with my friend, and we did mushrooms in a therapeutic context, and have since done that at a pretty high, there's mushrooms and then there's mushrooms. There's like the
high dose,
very high dose, yeah. It's all the things I would have written about or told you about, just feeling that, just having that sort of like sense of relating to it in such a felt level, just accelerated the whole healing process. It was sort of such a breakthrough. And I think there were maybe 5 or 6 different experiences that were often very hard and very challenging and very like really not fun at all, but ultimately very healing, that then like dislodge some things and shake some things loose and then sit with and think through and work on. And for me, it was always then in the backdrop of my own like avoda and practice and therapy and continued conversations with my friend who's my best friend and therapist. To the point where ultimately I'd say, was a couple months ago, was able to just experience sort of like a pure healing sense of like that's sort of been worked through and now can sort of shift into a more productive place and productive mode. And so it's, to me, and I'm very interested in this conversation between like, and I've met people who've said, I've done years and years of therapy, it's never done anything for me, and one ayahuasca trip or one whatever, and I'm like, now that's, and so therapy's shit, and this is, I'm sorry, I don't know.
It's fine.
And this is like, it's all about this. To your point about certainty, right? It's like whenever if it's this thing or it's that thing or it's mushrooms or it's ayahuasca or it's that or it's this or it has to be done in a shamanic ritual way or it has to be done in a very clinical way, right? Like everyone there's so much certainty, and I see a lot of that as I'm just sort of exploring more of that space, because I think that it is a helpful tool. Ultimately, I'm interested in healing and helping people and therapy, and sometimes I think it's a really effective way that some people can either fast track or not. I've heard you say it's not a shortcut, but like be able to make more progress.
Yeah, what I mean by not a shortcut is that the shortcut is like this idea that I could get there on my own, and sometimes we actually can't. It's not like 1,000 therapy sessions would not have got me there.
Yeah,
right. It got me somewhere that was new.
But I think it's both. I'm not sure what the right relationship or the container is. And so I think that was where we sort of left off on like, we should talk about this more. And then you talked about the House of More potentially sort of being your answer to that. Like, what is the relationship between community and breath work and therapy and medicine and ritual, and how do we make those experiences optimally healing? Because you also see a lot of people just keep going back and just keep doing more and more and more and keep suffering in those experiences and not necessarily feeling empowered to go out into the world and to change things and to use commerce as a way of making positive progress in the world. So like how do you make it so that those experiences actually catalyze like I've healed myself and now I need to go and help others?
Right. So what's been moving to me about Judaism as I get closer to it, and when I don't mean closer to it just like in practice, because to me it's like if you move too quickly through something, you actually miss the juice of it. And I'll go into like the specific Rebbe letters that I saw, and then I think I saw, which I referenced which I quoted in that talk, and then I think somewhere else I saw this concept that there are some people who are meant to do tshuva quickly. I don't know where I saw it, but this idea is in my head that there are some people who are meant to actually move through the process extremely quickly. Some souls have that journey. But for most of us, the vast majority, and if we're not sure, we're probably in the vast majority. Okay? Just like, it's probably me that's meant to move through, and it's probably not.
Yeah,
right? You're probably in the vast majority of people that are meant to move through it in some sort of way that actually can extract the message, the lesson, the change in each thing versus like, okay, I'm just going to go, kind of straight through this process, which you call spiritual bypassing, which it very often is. Like you jump to the end without without the juice of the journey and milking it and understanding it for what it is. So one of the beautiful things I found, like as I get closer to Judaism, it's first of all, it's very demanding. It's a discipline that's far more demanding than others, in my estimation. So for example, like I read a lot of like the more like popular meditation, like the kind of this wave of spiritual Jews which found meaning in Indian and Buddhist principles, and then mainstreamed those ideas, right? The Joseph Goldsteins and the Ram Dasses, and like that kind of spirituality and mainstreaming it. So a lot of that is about detachment, right? Like detach. Like we're just trying to get back to source and the oneness of the Creator. But I heard Nir Manusi talk how like that sounds like Judaism, like it's really close because it says oneness, so it sounds like the Judaism it sounds like the religion that Judaism is talking about, but Judaism is not. Like that's like only one aspect of Judaism, that oneness, which calls for detachment. And it seems like over and over, Judaism tries to find this razor's edge, right? Where, as opposed to, okay, I'm going to embark on this spiritual path of detaching from the world, which kind of has like one focus continuously. Just keep doing it. Keep meditating, keep detaching, find something that brings you down, whether it's a relationship or a substance or anything, it could be food. Like, how can you just keep detaching from the world? And then Judaism seems to say like something much different. Have the 6 days of the week, immerse yourself in the world, and have the Shabbos and transcend it. And then keep going back and forth between those two things. Bring the work week into Shabbos, bring the Shabbos into the work week. Like we're not detached to the point of like we're just detached, and we're not in the work week that like, hey, this is what it is. Like, no, there's a dance between these two. There's the ceremony and the integration that kind of keep flowing. So that's one that through my process with Judaism, I keep finding that it's a very demanding discipline in a way that I admire and aspire to be part of. It's like, okay, this is cool. Like seems to be like the most demanding one. And there are many aspects of this. I think like where the thought first came to me was seeing how Jews use a hybrid calendar between the sun and the moon, and others will use only one, and there's something telling in that. Something very telling in that. Like the Jews are constantly like, yes, we're on the moon's train, but we're always also trying to bring back to the sun. We're not completely detached from the weather patterns of this world. We want to bring like our experience. Like if you just go on the moon, then it's like, okay, there's this cycle that's happening, which is true. There's this 12-month cycle, but eventually it detaches from the world. Right? Like you have your Pesach in the middle of the summer, then in the middle of the winter, in the middle of fall, it just all over the place. And it's like, no, we're bringing ourselves back. We're bringing ourselves back continuously. So that's one, is just finding that within Judaism, and kind of the slow process of it has allowed me to pull at the richness of it. And as that relates to medicine, I think it's once again trying to find the balance between those. Medicine also has like this escape from the world in some way, or maybe like everything in the world, whatever it is, right? There's an escape that can happen versus, hey, let's bring it back to this. But then earlier you said something which intrigued me. You said that a rabbi told you that all spiritual experiences are yeshes. Yeah. So
I don't like want to attribute it to any person in particular because, but
you've heard it.
I've heard, and with my friend I referenced who was very religious and then now runs that center, and like now I'm more observant than he is, and I'm like pulling him back to like has a lot of trauma and it's more recent and he doesn't want to deal with that. And I had a conversation with him and I was saying like, I never felt anything when I'm davening. I've never felt anything when I've davened ever. I'm like, well, really? Really? He's like, no, just saying the words. Like, all for that? Never? He's like, no. Like, do you ever feel? It's like, do you never feel close to God? You never feel that? No. It's like, do you ever feel spiritual? He's like, yeah, all the time. It's like, what? When? What? It's like, well, out in the mountains or with a tree or breathing or whatever. Of course, I feel. You feel connected. I was like, why in your mind are those like different things? And he sort of brought up that same idea of like, oh, I think we were taught or we were told that like that feeling, the phenomenological experience of religion is unimportant. Like it's not real, you're hallucinating it, or it's just your own ego. Like you're not feeling God. You're not holy enough to be feeling God. Like you're feeling all spiritual and motivated right now in davening. Like that's detached from that, right? That's you. That's not it. Work harder. Like none of us are there, right? Only the tzaddikim are there. You can't possibly feel that. And it's like, what a hard message.
Right.
Yeah,
I think it's one of the criticisms certainly that I've heard from the Jewish world directed towards those who engage in self-help or healing work is that it's self-centered, egocentric, etc. How would you respond to that? Because it feels like the same...
I think I like the razor's edge, right? The Gesher Tzalmarayot, however you want to look at it, right? Like yes, it totally can be. And sometimes it really is, and you can see it. And it's just like you have to smell it and sense it, and it absolutely can be. There's a lot of people very stuck in navel gazing and in healing. And then you also can see the thing where if you're so fixated on finding and healing trauma, and you're just convinced that you just need to keep digging. Like if you go looking you're gonna find Drek. You're gonna find the thing you're looking for, right? So it becomes almost never ending too, which is sad. But at the same time, that doesn't mean it's always that. And I think you have to figure out how to walk that razor's edge of where it is focusing on yourself, but not eclipsing the bigger picture. And how do you stay in between those?
Right. Carl Jung talks about how it's like sometimes when someone leaves, especially a family system, right, they start the healing journey and they detach from the family system, or they could. And then many in the family will feel abandoned by, or they're doing something wrong. And he's like, that kind of gets, I don't know if absolved, I don't know the language he uses, but when the person goes into that work, then eventually they come back with some, gold. You say they broke down the wall, right? They find the gold behind it, and then they come back home with this, kind of the hero's journey. They come back home with this pot of gold and say like, hey, here's this beautiful thing I learned while I was away on this journey. And it's like, oh, okay. The movie Moana? Yeah, so it's kind of like that. Just like she leaves home and then comes back with something that saves the island. Yeah. Right, kind of that journey. So was she abandoning them? Well, it depends where if you're looking at the camera, then yes. But if you're watching the whole movie, then no. So sometimes you have to give the journey some time to breathe. Could it be navel gazing? Could it be self-centered and ego-centered? Yes. But let's see where this eventually leads to.
And for someone who, there's always in any sort of healing or correcting process, right? You're going to miss the mark and swing too far in one direction, and then you're going to have to swing back, and you're going to ideally come to some kind of middle plane or state of balance or equilibrium. And for a lot of people who aren't used to thinking about themselves and what do I want and what do I feel and what's my goal in life and what's my purpose and what's my mission, and you're just like have been adopted other people's versions of that, like maybe a little self-centeredness is for a time like a good thing, right?
Yeah. Also it's like there's more of something at the end, but typically what I find is like it's more, not for everyone, but for many, if like we're embarking on this process in a real way, then the end result should be like more of God's, the universe's purpose for us being expressed through the world. Like more of that is able to come out at the end. So I know it's like more, like it's more self, but it's like more self that leads to right a greater impact in that way.
I met someone at a ceremony recently, and he was saying that he's like, I need to be done for a while because I keep doing this, and every time I want to just move to Costa Rica and check out, right, detach and just like be spiritual, and like that's my sort of impulse. And it's like I know that I need to not do that and live my life. So it's almost like it's hard because it keeps pulling me back into that place, but I need to figure out how to integrate and kind of get deeper into my life. It's the story of the Miraglim too, right? We just did like right. The Miraglim wanted to that they wanted to stay in the desert. They wanted to detach. They wanted to stay spiritual. They wanted to, right. It's what an amazing life here. We don't want to go there. We don't want to work. We don't want to have to do that, and totally miss the point of it all.
But that tension, right, which like the Miraglim, right, followed by Korach, which Korach was very much, my understanding of it was the Like, okay, so if the world is real, then okay, then we're all equal. Transcendence doesn't exist. Transcendence doesn't matter. So who cares that you're transcendent, right? You're the same as all of us. And then it's like, no, there's both. There's that tension. And I think within, I've thought about this from this Marcel Proust. So he says, it's a quote I've heard through Haiti Schleifer. She's a relationship therapist. He said, the journey of life is to see old landscapes with new eyes. Right? It's not in seeing new landscapes. It's like, could I see the newness in my spouse? Can I see the newness in my child? So I think part of like the tension within Judaism is it's easy to have a spiritual experience in novelty. And it's harder to have a spiritual experience within that which could become mundane or rote. And then the tension that Judaism asks us is like, no, do this thing, right? Do the prayer over and over and over, and then find the newness in that experience. Like, what is new about this experience today? So you've read the Psalms last month, and now you're reading it again. Like, where's the newness now? And no doubt there's going to be a different verse. If someone's life is changing, if someone's life is moving, if they're not in the same place, you can be reading the same verses, but something else pops up to you in a totally different way. And it's like, oh, I get that. I just had a life experience that, okay, that's where King David was coming from. That's what he's talking about. That feels like my last month on the planet. And then the next time you read it, something else can pop out. I think that, once again, Judaism is demanding of us this kind of like razor's edge. Like, no, do the rote. Find the mundane. Stay married to the same person. And then have passionate, intimate sex. Like that. Be in that. It's easy for it to become mundane and rote and boring. And it's also easy to have passionate sex with new partners constantly. But can you have passionate sex with a new partner constantly who's the same person?
Because you're new.
Because you're new. Yeah. Or I heard Adine Steinsaltz, who's become a favorite of mine recently, say that someone said, like, well, you do the same prayer every single day. It's so boring. He says, yeah, it's the same prayer, but you're not meant to be the same person. If you are the same person, then you're the one who's boring, not the prayer. So I think, once again, with medicine, it's kind of the same thing. It's like, a lot of people argue about medicine, like, is it bad? Is it good? Is it this? Is it that? Like, your opinion doesn't matter. I told many artists, like, your opinion doesn't matter, because the fact of the matter is it's happening and people are doing it. So you can sit detached from it, but it's happening, and it's happening more and more and more, right? So clearly the one who has the power believes this is meant to be happening in some way. It doesn't mean all of it is good. Of course, nothing in the world is all good, but this is where it's moving. It's like, we can sit here and argue about whether AI should exist and what damage it's going to do to the world. It doesn't matter what our opinion is. Maybe some people who want to sit in the politics side of it and see, are there regulations we can enforce? But to sit there and just talk about this stuff as if we're getting somewhere is not going to get us anywhere. It's happening, and then with it, there's going to be some beautiful goodness that comes from it, and some not so good. And what do I want to do with this thing? And the same is true with medicine. It is happening.
What do you think of the theology of it? Like, why now? Why these things are like? Do we need them more now? Are we? I've thought of the story of why Hasidus came to the world, and the crown jewel, right, was sort of ground up to give to the sick prince just so he can get a sip into his lips, right? It's almost like that. Like, we're so far from being able to appreciate it that, like, he just needs to give it to us in some way, or like, well, I don't know. How do you make sense of it?
So what's interesting is this same argument, right, plays out in this community. So the argument of Hasidus and like the Chassidim and Misnagdim, right? Which is, it wasn't, are these ideas true? Are you talking like at the top of the argument, right? It wasn't, are these ideas true? It was, should this be released in the world? Will it be a net positive or a net negative? Okay. If you pull this argument back, there was an argument thousands of years ago whether the Talmud should be written, or should we continue to maintain it as oral? Okay. So now eventually one side wins. Right, the Talmud gets transcribed.
Rebbe thought it was a travesty that he wrote down the Mishnah, right? He personally was like mourning when he did it.
But it was done.
Yeah, he did it,
and it happened.
Yeah.
Okay, but now we can sit there and say, okay, there was something that he was concerned about, right? There was this argument that existed, right? And let's say it went 51-49, right? It was like Supreme Court ruling and 5 ruled in one and 4 ruled in the other. Okay, this wasn't unanimous. What were the 4 concerned about? Where were they coming from with this? So you have the Talmud that was written down, you have Chassidus, which was exposed, and if you go into the medicine world, this same argument exists in that world. So for example, amongst the Native Americans, just to make it practical. So there are some who believe, right, they fight for something like pretty interesting, that peyote should be legal for them and like almost like more illegal than regular drugs for anyone else. Like this is like the worst thing, you're taking something away from Native Americans. Like this has to be protected and preserved for their culture and nobody else. Okay, so there's that mentality within it. And I'm not going to get into the specifics of every single person and the way they break it down, but it's just this idea, this should be held here. This should not go out. There's a danger that happens. And there are others that like, we're not going to have a world left if we don't let this medicine get to the masses. It's not, you're wrong. It's understanding there's a tension that exists between these two, and then from that tension, there's a birth. And hopefully the new birth is, hey, hold this in a sacred way. Right? Which is probably what they were, like the new birth of Chassidus. If there was only the Chassidim pushing this idea, then it could have been, okay, like here we are, here it is. And like the Misnagim, right, their message helps us say like, no, hold this in a sacred way. Like remember this is a crown jewel. And understand that this becoming like out there can also be dangerous. There's some sort of risk that we want you to, okay, so it's going, but carry this risk. Like know the other side of this. Understand our argument and our perspective through this process. And I think this exists throughout, but the bottom line is we're seeing it's there. I think from the way I see it is that leaders, like this whole concept of leadership is very different today than it once was. So I would imagine as children, there was much more respect for, let's say, the president's office, right, governor's office, like all of these, like politically, right, kings and queens in countries, even if it was just a name like in England, but there was a certain reverence that they held. And over the last number of years, like a lot of these have been dismantled for one reason or another, right? Some is because secrets have come out. Others, like in the Jewish world, like no one has stepped up in the way like the Rebbe has. You have a child, so I'm Chabad, right? So it's my background. But I think across the world, I don't think there's like a clear Jewish leader today in history like there was before. It's almost like all is becoming democratized. And it creates this like uncertainty. I always think like leaders don't have certainty, followers do. Like even the greatest leaders don't have certainty. That's not part of what they have, right? Moses himself constantly arguing, debating, wondering, right, wrong, right? He's listening to others. He wasn't just, he wasn't like a dictator. Aaron comes with a complaint, maybe you're right. Miriam comes with a complaint, maybe you're right. God has to defend, right? There's many of those ideas. So a leader doesn't have kind of that absolute certainty. The follower does. Moshe said it, right? The ones who choose to follow in that way, like, okay, he said it, I'm going to do. But we don't have that today. And then medicine to me is like part of that, where it's saying, okay, like everything is accessible to you, everything is available. You can't really be a follower in the classic sense, like you were able to be in the past. Someone can say they're a follower of the Rebbe, but you can't go in and get your answer like before. You can do things. I wrote a letter, but I've seen multiple times where people told me they wrote a letter to the Rebbe and they started describing the answer. I said, can I see the answer? And I said, I'm reading it very differently than you. You're highlighting funny words, in my opinion, right? So it's not, which wouldn't happen in a personal communication.
Told you, right.
What?
If he just told you.
He just told, yeah. So what we end up having, right, and medicine creates that kind of direct experience. People can layer in, we need this shaman and that shaman and whatever else. Even those who understand it say, okay, that's to create a safe space. That's not to create your connection, right? Your connection and your experience is going to be through, every person is going to have their own individual experience. And then from there, move in the path that they need to. So I think that's what we're kind of being faced with, is an opportunity for us all to kind of be like, I don't use the word like leaders, but all to be leaders in our own way and to find our answer, and then to know that what we've decided, like we can't blame on anyone. And we can take full, or another way of saying it is we can take full credit for our choices today. Whereas if we look back hundreds of years, we can say, okay, so like they chose, but what would they have done in a different circumstance? And I think this is that circumstance. The what would you have done in a different circumstance that every single generation could have been challenged with? It's like, okay, you became a great tzaddik in your time. You were great. You lived in Russia. You didn't see a woman that you weren't related to until you were introduced to a girl from another town, right? At 20 and you're already married to her. Okay, you didn't sin in this way. Okay, but what would you have done if sex was available everywhere? You can go into an app and you can have a one-night stand then, that night. Or if you couldn't, you can sit in the comfort of your own bedroom and see more women than people have seen. And what would you have done then? And I think that throughout, up until now, every single person the finger could have pointed at them, no matter what level they reached, is, but what would you have done then? And now is it then? What would you have done if everything is available? You have the Torah, more than you can imagine, available. English, French, any language. Whatever, it doesn't matter. You want it, you can get it. You can learn it, you can understand it, can make it make sense to you. Medicine, available. Sex, available. Money, available. You're not making it, don't worry, borrow it. Like, we'll lend it to you. Like this. It's there. It's there.
Yeah.
Right? And now what are you going to do? Now what are you going to do?
And how does that, like the idea that we're faced with this now, what does it say about us or what we're struggling with? Like, why uniquely is I guess medicine in particular becoming this point of contention, or even though it's the Pandora's out of the box, as you said, like what is it about our generation, or what is it about now that like what do we
yeah, I don't know
what do we think God's will for us? What do we think God thinks? Why?
Yeah, I don't know why you would assume I have that answer. Right? I don't. I just know it is. Right? Like right now, it's just what seems to be.
Yeah.
It's just what seems to be. So looking at a number of different domains in our life where things that were once so inaccessible are now so accessible. Things that was like, I don't know, even like money, I keep going back to money. It was so far-fetched when I was there, so far-fetched. It was like you were born in a class, you were staying in class. That's what it felt like. Even when I grew up, that's what it felt like. You're born in a class, you stay in a class. Money, you have money, you don't. Right? And then that's changed over the last 20, 25 years. You can say what you want about the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer, but the amount of people moving classes is like, nothing has ever existed like this in history. Someone can go from like nothing to worth millions and millions of dollars in a couple of years, right? So there's all this opportunity. It doesn't mean everything literally is available to everyone. I get it. It doesn't mean literally everything is available to everyone. Some people may not be able to take medicine, and some people may not be able to get aroused, and some people, tried to get credit and they couldn't get credit. I don't mean it literally, but it's more available at any point in time. And then I think like the true us all gets exposed through this process. I think at any point in time in Jewish in world history until today, anyone says they've accomplished a certain level, you could say those were your circumstances then.
You could throw them in the deep end now. And
what would you do with an iPhone?
Yeah.
What would you do if you had this on you like all day long? You became a great scholar all the time. Like I probably would have written 30 books by now if I lived in Russia. Now I have a hard time getting through like a poem, like just half a page. Right? These kind of conversations. Look what we need to have a conversation. This has nothing to do with the microphone and the speakers. It's not like podcasts are big. Most people don't listen to podcasts. Don't listen to whole podcasts. It's about having real conversations. Yeah. And the only way we can do it is we put the cameras on. We put the things. The only way we can sit like normal people and have a conversation.
And hang out.
Not thinking you're going to grab your phone or I'm going to grab my phone. And if you're going to grab your phone, then I want to be the first to grab it. Right? So we never drop in.
And part of it, I guess, creating more spaces for that connection is huge, right? And that's obviously just that driving what you do as well, right?
Yeah, I think what I try to do is like be the change I want to see, essentially. So what you're trying to do with medication, I think it's what God wants us to do. I do think it's what I think God wants to do. It's like, okay, you've experienced some sort of pain. Do what you could to make sure no one else does. And it sounds like from your story, there are a couple that stuck out, 3 that stuck out. One is with your dad. You know, we didn't pull too far. I questioned a couple of times. Should I not?
You're
Usually
very welcome to.
But usually I didn't feel like I didn't feel like I should. So we did a little bit. We touched on it, but it's clear there's pain and there's something that could be pulled there in the relationship with your dad, right? Some unresolved pain around parents, child, right? All of that. Then how that relates to God, right? Which this is a very I came across this concept from Patrick Carnes, who's kind of the father of sex addiction, sex addiction healing, and he was kind of the first therapist who stood on his ground and said, like, sex addiction is a real thing. We can be addicted to sex, and he became a pioneer in this space. In any case, I learned from him, I'm sure it's not his concept, is that our view of our Father, like one of the roles our Father plays, is communicating to us who God is and how he operates with us. And whatever template he gives us is the template that we will have for our Father in heaven. That's the template. And it's one of the most central roles that a father plays. And then as an adult is being able to break free of that.
In terms of charting a new paradigm for...
Yeah, I heard from the Baal Shem Tov, not directly from him, and if I did, someone say I was hallucinating. So, but that he said that had he not lost both his parents young, that he would have never gone on this journey to find the ultimate father and the ultimate mother.
And he had that, his dad's last words to him were sort of his guiding.
Right, that is the story. Right, don't be afraid. Right, don't like.
Even the little bit he had was so formative.
What?
Even the little thing he had was so formative.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it sent him on a search, and the search was, I need a father, right? I need a mother. And what happens as children, we say, I need a father, I need a mother. That need gets met in an imperfect way. So, and then we meet an imperfect father, we meet an imperfect mother, and then we identify God as that. And then through our journey, we're forced to go further. The Baal Shem Tov basically saying that he never had to go through that journey of the imperfect father and the imperfect mother. He was forced to go straight into meeting that need of a father and mother by finding a perfect father and mother, by finding a godly father and mother.
And Shar B'Tachon, I guess, is like the ideal version of it, right? You're supposed, like, the infant learns to trust their mother and then their father and then themselves and other people, like it ultimately laddering up to being able to have this relationship with God. So to your point, like, we are the models of that, and our own role in creating our children's faith, like, is as they relate to us, is so critical.
Sure. Yeah. So the point, the way I got here was saying there are 3 areas of pain that you've identified through this podcast. One was there with your parenting. Second was the religious, the Mayan note, get like too far, too fast, getting in that competition, and then finding a way to not lose Judaism and not lose yourself in Judaism, which, by the way, that's another aspect of Judaism that's different than other religions, right? So Christianity, the way it is like in the Western world, is very much the individual, right? Certainly, like, I want to say Christianity, but let's say like the religion of Americanism is very much the individual. Find yourself. Don't worry so much about, right? The American dream. You find
Self-actualization.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And then the Muslim approach is like lose yourself in the religion, like just completely be swallowed up by the religion. And then Judaism is saying like both.
Walk the razor's edge.
Exactly. Find that balance between being part of a collective, improving the collective, but maintaining your unique individuality throughout. Like, once again, that razor's edge, like we just find it over and over. So over here, you've experienced the pain of that. And then there was a third, which I'm not remembering right now, but I had it a few seconds ago. Not the point. The point is only that one of my understandings is that God wants us to say, okay, like, I've experienced pain in a certain way, and then how can I make sure that no one else does? Or how can I do my best to make sure that no one else does in that way? How can I at least move the world further on those ideas? So, or we learn a lesson the hard way and say, how can I soften others' journey in this direction so they don't have to stumble I spent 8 years getting sober from porn addiction, from when I started to, when I like felt not quite 6 or 7 years. So I felt my feet on the ground. Like, why does it have to take that long? I didn't need 6 or 7 years of learning. There was a lot of missteps along the way. Can I shorten the path for someone? Like, would that be possible?
And then how, and this to the business conversation, I guess, is like for me, and I think for a lot of other, and this to the point about like when you have that clarity of, okay, this was my story, this is my experience, this is what I care about, this is what I'm passionate about, right? For me, I was like, I wanted to be the father I never had for my children. I want to have the family life I didn't have. I'm sort of committed to that. Thank God I'm doing it. It's working. People are recognizing it. So like I care about this. I can make money doing this. But people pay for therapy, people pay for coaching, people pay for these things, right? So I'm like, I could start to do this thing, and I still have business and clientele and things over here. And I'm drawn to do, when you're in that alignment, right? You're like, wow, okay, I'm living this sense of mission and purpose and able to then ideally monetize that. And that's sort of the Japanese have that ikigai, right? You're like, I'm in that zone. There's ideally not, I mean, there's a less obvious path to the same amount of material influence and wealth than there is in other paths. So like, is by making your business your mission and purpose, like, are you, versus keeping your business as something else, and then you have like projects and passion projects, and you sort of funnel money into doing something. And it's something I've thought about and grappled with. Right? Like, I know if I stayed in consulting at the firm I was at, I could be partner within a certain amount of time. I know how much money I'd make. I'd probably hate my life, or not. You know, you do that, and you're an influence there, and you take that money, and then you do the other thing. Versus, and I think a lot of people maybe have that sense of, this is my ikigai, and then it's hard to make money doing whatever it is that you're trying to make money doing, and I don't know, it just feels like a ripe point of entry for that whole business and medicine conversation.
Right, which is probably where it should. That's where we started the conversation. We happened to go down a few rabbit holes. So it's interesting. It's like sometimes I can work really hard to get to an idea, or like when I say work really hard is like I feel like I've been destined to like learn experientially. Like learn through my own, let's like experience a lesson and then try to put it into words, and hopefully others don't have to experience it in the same way. But then sometimes like something is learned and then it worked really hard, and then you find someone wrote it and you're like, why couldn't I find this book 5 years ago? But it feels to me like it's very easy to say like, this is what one should do, this is what one shouldn't do, right? In terms of practice, like ikigai, finding, in my own case, in my own life, like where it is today, I don't make my money in the place where I'm most passionate about. And then I found other areas to channel that. And I've tried to switch at different times, but it didn't work. Like this is where this is kind of how it's shook out. I don't know what everyone should do, but I know for my own path, it's that over and over I've been at this crossroads of courage and fear. And when I've listened to fear, exactly what I was afraid of came back to me in greater proportions. And when I've listened to courage, things have become better over time. And reading this book by James Hollis, I don't know if you know the writer. I think his book is A Life of Meaning. He has a number of books, A Life of Meaning. He's the student of Jung I mentioned earlier. So someone asked him, like, what is most important? And he's like, what is most important is to not live a life governed by fear. Like that was what he said. Not live a life governed by fear, and the only way out is boldness, which I've shared here. The only way out is boldness, and if someone does not learn this, like they risk. Essentially, like I'm using my words to make his point, but they risk living a purposeless existence. Like the meaning they came here for will never be actualized unless they are repeatedly bold.
Or unafraid.
Yeah. And something I found interesting, I did a podcast on this subject, is the very first law in Shulchan Aruch is about boldness.
Waking up like a lion? No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that whole concept, right? So one of the ideas is not to be, not to, like if someone makes fun of us, if someone mocks us, if someone puts it down, not to be deterred from our path. right? That ability to be able to stay the course seems to be a prerequisite for the rest of Shulchan Aruch. It's like, start here, learn to be bold. Learn to be bold. If you can't be bold, which is the same thing I'm saying, like, you want to live a path, you want to live a life that God wants for you, then you're going to be faced repeatedly with the voice of evil, which speaks through fear, and the voice of God, which speaks through courage. That's something, it took me years to find this, and then I read it in a book over Shabbos. I'm like, what was this? You know. Rav Nachman talks about it also. He says that Echad Haya Avram, right? Says, I forget where it's sourced, that Avram was like one. What does it mean that Avram was one? So normally we say, like, hey, he was a very unique person. It was like there was only one Avram. But the way he understands it, or one of the ways he understands it, is that Avram was like walking a path, and the whole world was walking in the opposite direction. And he was comfortable. He was like saying, like, this is mine. And Rav Nachman says, like, if someone wants to embark on this path of Judaism, that's why it's like when I go slower through it, like, I feel like I'm learning some of these things about Judaism itself, which is, it's so demanding. It's such a demanding practice. It's not like just read this, do that, and you're done. No, you're constantly faced with the razor's edge. Yeah. You're constantly faced with the decision of, I'm praying, but is there a bucket in the room? And it's not going to be always so obvious, right? As a bucket in the room, like, I'm constantly going to be faced with this razor. Am I doing it? Am I doing it the right way? And the way Rav Nachman talks about it is like, someone has to be willing to walk on a path that's like, he can be criticized by his mother, by his father, by his wife, by his kids, by like literally everyone. But if he believes this is like God's calling for him, and he moves through this with clarity and with purpose and
doing that, but not steamrolling people too, right? It's
100%,
which makes it even more of a razor's edge, to your point, because you could hear that and then interpret it as like, you just go for it.
Right. I think it's right. I think it's saying like one's individual journey, right? One's individual journey that I'm going to go on, right? I spoke about being very understanding about my wife's journey with Shabbos, but I also want her to be very understanding of mine, right? And if she's not understanding, it's not going to change my conviction or my approach to it. Like, this feels right for me in the moment, and that's all, right? This is where I am. Like, once I have clarity on this purpose. So I don't know what people say about spiritual experiences or not. Like, we may find out we're all wrong. Like, I don't know, but if I'm wrong, wouldn't it be better if I lived a life like feeling alive? Wouldn't it be better if like I lived a life where the people around me were doing well? Or like, let's say you're wrong about parenting. Let's say you're wrong, right? We find out you're wrong, whatever that means. But in your house was peace. Yeah. And in your house was comfort for your children. In your house was like goodness was felt. Then that's all. Like, we have to be able at some point to look at our environment and say, like, is this or is this not what we want? And if it's you being yelled at by a guy who maybe does every mitzvah, it's like, that's not what I want. And if it's somehow, I may not be doing enough, or my wife may not be doing enough, and I may be too lax on my kids, but somehow they're dancing, right? And they're doing well. Like, why am I questioning that?
And boldness, right? Staking a claim on what you believe is. I'm starting to get into it. It's very uncomfortable for me. I'm starting soon. This is actually helpful. This podcast appearance for that is to like have more of a social media presence. I don't use social media. I don't like social media. I find it like incredibly. I think there's also so much research about all the negatives of it and mental health but from a business perspective, I think it's where the people I'm trying to talk to are a lot and figuring out a way to do that. And some of the people I've been speaking with who are good at this and know this space tell you that it's you either have to be like F yes or like F you, or like there's, if you're vanilla, if you're middle, if you have like a middling position on something, you're kind of wavering or waffling or like lacking boldness, I guess would be another way to frame that, then you're not going to stand out. You either have to say like, this is the thing, or that's definitely not the thing, and it's this thing. And so having that clarity of conviction.
Right. That is how someone's going to know, right? Kind of become a magnet
Just versus noise, right? To have signal and stand out from the noise. But the fear is, of course, being one of those people who has conviction and certainty. How do you have conviction without having that like arrogant certainty? And how do you straddle that? And I think just living with the question to our whole conversation is probably the answer to that.
Right. I think there's a difference between something we carry for ourselves and something we impose on others, right? There could be like, this is absolutely right for me, and not putting that on another person. I'll give you one example that I imagined, and I completely made this up, but you told me about your friend who had a medicine journey that first was not recreational, right? A bunch of friends, bag of mushrooms, take it. But somehow his path led to, I'm going to do this in an above board legal way, and I'm going to, clinical and everything else under the sun. So if he comes at this from like, this is the way to do it, and it's like, I'm just imagining that he's that. I'm not saying he is, right? But I'm just imagining that, like, it would be like archetypical, right, of someone who found mushrooms in a recreational way, and then somehow decided like, hey, that's not the way. This carries risk. Let me see if I can eliminate some of the risk, and then becoming very religious in that their conviction that this is the only way to do it, and forgetting that, but that's not how they met it.
Yeah.
Right. So like there was something godly in the entry that this person had towards it. And certainly, yeah, he can take the approach of, hey, there's so many risks associated with that. Like maybe we were 10 friends and 9 of them ended up right in a path and I was the only one. Can I get the odds to go in the other direction? But to become too like absolute about this, where, hey, sometimes God has to meet someone in that way. Right. Sometimes that's the way it's going to be met, and leaving room kind of for both. So I can be very resolute that this is the way I want to do medicine in this way. I want to practice medicine in this way. I want to share it in this way. I want to be. But then when we start taking a war on, like we start spending our energy like against something else and against someone else, I think that's where now we're imposing our own ideas. No, here, your friend's energy can totally be directed towards creating the safest clinic he can conceptualize without having to fight at all against unsafe use of medicine. It's not a fight. It's just like, here's a place, and for those who need it, this exists. Yeah. Right? It's a different energy. Yeah. And that's where I think like there's a place where energy kind of like spills over into the other, right? It's like imagine a fire burning, and it's like burning straight and strong and tall like that. I think it's like boldness, and then there's a time where it's like, right? Let me like take some wind and throw it over you. You need some of this fire, and that's where it becomes. Like fire suddenly becomes dangerous.
You to the fire.
Yeah, exactly. Fire becomes dangerous. Here it is. It's strong. It's proud. I'm not going to dilute it because someone else thinks fire is dangerous, but I'm not throwing it on them. I'm just like, I'm standing as a very strong pillar, and I'm going to do everything I could for this fire to be blazing as much as possible. I'm not going to diminish so others feel safe, but I'm not sending it out anywhere. And at the same point in time is, the container has to match the fire throughout. And we will know if it matches the fire throughout.
Just because we'll see it.
Right, because then the wind won't knock it over.
Yeah.
Right, so it's like I think that's a journey. And the same journey with religion. The specific letter that the Rebbe references is it talks about when God gave the land of Israel to the Jews. And he's saying, okay, like you're going to go in, and the land is going to be filled with multiple nations. He says, and ma'at agarshenu, slowly I will drive them out. Where God is saying, but it's funny, you started this with Israel and the trip to Israel. So the way, I think Kabbalistically or others, they said like there's Israel, the land of Israel, and then there's us. We are a land of Israel that needs conquering. Like we need to conquer our own inner landscape. And we move too quickly through the land. Like if God says, like God says, like if I drive out all the other nations, like boom, just take them out completely, then what's going to happen is you will have not inhabited it yet, and then wild animals will come in. And wild animals are going to be a lot more dangerous. So it's like, yes, those nations aren't there, but they're actually serving a purpose and a function, which is right now they're inhabiting the land. And it's being maintained, and it's being cared for, and there's people in there. And then, yes, they're not the good people and not the people for the land. And the land eventually has to spit them out, but they're serving a function. It's like slowly, I will drive them out. Which we see this with addiction. Sometimes, like certain levels of addiction, it's like you don't move in 1,000,000 miles an hour. Sometimes you have to do the cold turkey, right? Sometimes you have to do the cold turkey. Then other times you say like, okay, we're going to get you off this. We're going to put you on that. We're not going to. I like methadone, for example. Like you give someone methadone in order to avoid the heroin. You have to find those moments.
Yeah.
And now, in case this becomes too absolute, right? And you say, okay, everything is slowly. Passover, we're told exactly the opposite. Right? It's like sometimes, or something I tell friends, like you just have to decide. You just have to decide, like, get this out of your life. Like the decisions sometimes have to be quick. Like I'm out of Egypt and I'm running. Right, and there's some sort of balance between the two. Again, so it always goes back to it. It's not this easy path, but the message that I've seen for myself that I'm living with. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm just saying where I am, and someone can choose for themselves whether this fire is attractive to them or repulsive to them. That's someone's own choice. But for those who do find it attractive, let me be clear about what it is. It's very slow. It's very deliberate. It's ensuring that if I'm moving forward, I'm making a commitment that I'm comfortable making and maintaining. I'm not making commitments that I may then afterwards have to, hey, God, I'm doing this. No, I'm not. I got to take this back.
You just say bli neder all the time in your
No, it's not bli neder.
No, I know. That's just
right.
That's like a tick, like a compulsive tick that people have of like essentially saying I can say this and not actually feel committed to it.
Go tell it to your wife with everything. Go tell your wife. We can do date night once a week, bli neder.
Yeah.
Okay, but does your bli neder mean anything?
Right.
Right, was the focus on the promise or on the bli neder?
Yeah.
Like where were you focused on?
Yeah.
But I don't know. That's kind of the approach, and still learning. I think a good teacher is a great student. A good leader is a great follower. So being in a place where we know how to do the opposite of what we're saying we do as well.
And that was the letter you referenced in that event with Mark
Yeah.
Komarsky. And I'm now remembering that was, I really liked that the first time you said it as well. That was because you're asking me like what stood out about that, and you referenced that.
Yeah, for me, I kind of had a fortunate experience with Rebbe letters, but I have to be honest, like I don't only do this with Rebbe letters. I want to be clear, it's the way I live my life.
Yeah.
Right. So the way I live my life is that if information comes to me, then it was relevant. It's relevant. It's not an accident. If information just somehow shows up on my doorstep, it's relevant. There's an approach that I'll take to a Rebbe's letter that's slightly different. We'll understand, okay, here's someone whose life there's an eternal quality to his way of being, which what I mean by eternal is like it's gotten better over time. Right? Like he's aging very well. Like the Rebbe is aging really, really well. Right? As an example, like Bill Gates is aging very poorly. Very poorly. Just like for a contrast.
Yeah.
He was like top dog 10 years ago.
It's more and more keeps coming out.
Exactly. He's aging poorly. The Rebbe is aging very, very well. Right? Like more and more. So there's an eternal quality to his ideas. There was something here. It's like, wow, it stood the test of time. Not perfect, right? There's challenges. I grew up in Chabad. There's plenty there that needs tending to, right? And he said it very clearly. He said it himself. He's like, I've done what I could. Clearly it hasn't been enough because we're not there. Clearly it hasn't been enough. We are not there. And now I'm leaving it to you guys. But there was something that he pushed forward in a beautiful way that we see. So obviously when I read Rebbe's letter, it's different. But as I started doing medicine, and in medicine I had some very powerful experiences about Shabbos and about stuff about kosher more recently, and even tzitzis, right? Like different ideas, like really feeling like I understand it and see it. And, at around that time that I was starting to experience those, which could become very intense, was I received some letters, like several at the same time, or in a short period of time, about like this concept of ma'at argashenu, like slowly, I would try the ma'at slowly, and I see it, like when we move slowly through it, it's like, okay, what is this? Like how am I with it? How am I without it? What's the difference when I do it? What's it when I don't? With my children, like how do I go? How do we relate in a way where there is no force, there's only influence, there's only attraction, there's no promotion, right? To borrow a 12-step term, and in a way that someone wants it for themselves. My wife over and over asked me, why do you keep Shabbos? Why do you keep Shabbos? No, not for me. If you see it, like if over time it starts speaking to you, then in your way. And then when she did it, also slow her down with the kids. Like go in your way. Like not like, boom, this is what it is. And like start imposing. That didn't work for me. I had to unlearn a lot of this to become closer to Judaism. I don't want to do it to my kids. And I don't think it's the way it should be.
In the, I don't know if it's quite what you're saying, but to me, to paraphrase what I thought you were maybe saying about this hypothetical of my friend who, right, like, there's different paths, like there's different paths in Torah, there's different paths in sort of this medicine experience, and there's no wrong one, and they're all sort of equally valid? Or do you think that
No, I'm not saying it's equally valid.
Okay.
I'm saying he can hold the truth of his conviction without becoming like a war against something.
But I guess I'm curious what you think is sort of the ideal path of integrating this.
Of medicine?
Yeah.
So when people talk about medicine,
Yeah.
like medicine, and they do integration, they don't do integration, everything else, I've shared this before, but my idea of integration is looking at the life of people who I admire, who are also practicing this, and then being in a community of those people. So integration is not, I'm going to speak to a therapist. In my opinion, integration is not, I'm going to speak to a therapist for an hour before, even a day before, and now I did integration after a journey. I think integration is saying, okay, medicine has messages, right? There's certain messages. It's decidedly more spiritual, right? And what I'll define that word in a little bit. It's decidedly more spiritual than, say, therapy is. Where medicine is like giving meaning towards a lot, right? It's much wider. The perspective is like, okay, so like now look at yourself in the perspective of the whole. Look at this story as something to teach you versus, like in some way where you're the center of it and saying, okay, so your child is acting up. What do you need to change? This is existing in your world. How did you create that? And then seeing it and starting to live from that perspective. But the other side of it is that being in that perspective, right? So for me, when I saw that, I was like, okay, I don't always see people treating other people well in this area. I saw a lot, which for me was tough. I saw a lot of broken families. I saw a lot of poverty for people in medicine. And that just very simply, like, if you're living good, why do you have to be broke? And then in order to sustain that brokenness, it often required them to put pressure on others.
What kind of pressure?
Financial pressure on others. In practice, I've seen it. I've seen it in, I don't want to speak to for the specific communities, but I saw it in various different medicine communities where there's this subtle desire to detach from the realities of the world, but then there is the reality of the world.
You just got to pay your bills.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So who is going to resolve that? How is that going to be resolved? So for someone who wants to escape the reality of the world, but then has the reality of the world, the best place to go is to those students who are coming to you for medicine. Now you need to put some of your pressure on them, right? So those are ways. Okay, so I see medicine, but I'm not seeing it integrated in a way that I want to live. That's not the way I want to live. Someone else may choose to, right? But the way that I want to live is I want to live very much in this world. I want there to be abundance. I want to be able to have for myself and not worry. I want to be able to think clearly. I want to be able to share with others. I want freedom to be able to do. Money gives an amazing capacity. We have an idea, and we want to do something. With Rabbi Gardner, we spoke about this, which to me, like, if someone truly wants their soul to be expressed,
You need money.
you need a lot of money. A lot of money. That means for our full expression of our soul, we likely need a lot of money. And that can happen in multiple ways. It could. There are some great rabbis and leaders who didn't make a lot of money, but they influence and act.
To raise it, right?
Yeah. Right. They were able to raise it, they were able to direct it, they were able to influence it. So in a lot of ways they did. But you have to tap into that energy. If you can't tap into that energy in a responsible way, then the soul's message is going to be diluted. And then the other side is really seeing someone's practical life doing well, their relationships, their family, especially their core family. Is that doing well? And you see the fullness of a human being. I think it's a big problem that a lot of, and some that I've been working on, it's been tougher than I imagined, but just physical health. Physical health is it's a big problem that a lot of spiritual, quote unquote, spiritual leaders or spiritual teachers or spiritual, especially amongst rabbis who are just not physically healthy. And there's something, when we talk about I've seen these wheels of life, a wheel of life.
Mm-hmm.
So you want all the spokes doing well, and where are you on every single, whatever one's wheel of life is, Okay, typically have different things that are important, but health is going to be on there.
Yeah.
And when someone is noticeably unhealthy, and not with extreme age, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking 30s, 40s, 50s, noticeably unhealthy. There's something missing.
But
So that,
you mean diet and exercise for the most part, probably, right?
yeah.
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 Which is, it says more than just, it's not just a spoke. It's how you feel about yourself, how you treat yourself, how you, like,
It's huge.
It's huge. It's not just one spoke. I feel like it's,
Right, you
it's
feel like
the
it's
axle of the
foundational.
whole wheel, right? It's,
Yeah. No, but I'm saying for myself, like I've noticed that, like I've been very focused on it in the last year, and regular blood tests and gym, 4 or 5 times a week, and I'm still not quite where I want to be, not on some of the markers, right? Some of the things that I can hide, not physically the way probably 20 pounds more than I want to be, but I want to see this in the world. Like that's what I think we want to see in the world are people who are hitting on all of those things and then aspire to be like them. Like that's a role model that I think that's what I'm looking for.
yeah.
Right. So someone who's hitting on the aspects of spiritual, physical, health, impact, family, career, fun, relationships, like all of those things are doing well.
Integrated.
Or integrated. And then being in a community of people, that's what the integration is like, okay, so you have all these things you're doing medicine, you're doing Judaism, you're doing whatever it is, business and everything else, and you're not getting lost in any of them, right? Within each one, and how do we know it's not being lost, is that there's a wheel of life, right? There's something that's moving forward. One spoke is not just reaching out too far. It's like, oh, my spiritual life is amazing, but my kids can't stand me, right? But you should see the visions I've had over the last week or year or 10 years, right? So finding a way that it all is, tight and can roll forward and move things forward in a beautiful way. And when I think about integration, I think being part of a community that has that.
Just being around people who are living that way.
Exactly.
Is the best medicine.
Right. So then you have an experience that's unreal. You go to someone who's, okay, he's in medicine, he's working with medicine, he's living a life that you aspire to live. And you say, okay, how did you handle this? How do you handle these kind of visions on medicine? I got a question from someone recently. He's like, I had a vision on medicine of me being with this woman. Like, what do I do? Okay, so I didn't have that particular vision on journey, but I've had experiences of like relationships with other people or business relationships or things like that. And what I've learned through it, watching myself and other processes, is that there's my experience and there's other person's experience. And to impose my medicine experience on someone else would be crazy. So for example, say like, hi, I had a vision that me and you were married on medicine, and therefore, here's the ring. Actually, I don't even know why we need a ring. We're already married, right? That's too far. Right? I had a vision that we're business partners. I had a vision that whatever it is, right, on medicine, and then to impose that on someone else because that was a vision, as true as it may be, is not the way it needs to be. So we can kind of stand in that truth, whatever that means, and then we can allow the world in this way to come to us. And then when it comes to us, we can say, okay, this I'm not going to put on someone else. Like, let it come. And the example I gave in my own case is I had a strained relationship with a family member. And on medicine, I felt we went through a whole journey together. And at the end, I expressed like, hey, I'm ready for a relationship with you. And during the medicine journey itself, I thought to message that. Like almost like it was a feeling. And I'm like, okay, I'm not touching my phone. I'm not doing any of that. And I said, when I came to, I'm not doing anything with it. I don't need to do anything with it. If it's true, something will happen. And over the next couple of weeks, I received a call from that person, which was very uncharacteristic of their way of relating to me. And then I was able to take the medicine experience and then say, okay, I'm here for it. Like I'm here to receive this. So that's an example of ways we say, okay, we see someone who's living with medicine in a way that we admire. And then when there's experiences, we have a network of people that we can go to. And it's not just one, because everyone has a very unique experience. This one's trying to do something in business. This one has a family. This one doesn't. This one's male. This one's female. Everyone has different. This one suffered loss. This one didn't. So we have a whole community of people, and through that community, we'll learn. And we're all very young. We're all very new to this medicine journey. And I think hold that as say, hey, whoever you know in the Jewish world who's doing medicine has not been doing it
new, right?
It's new. Too long, and just hold that. We're babies.
Yeah. So creating that community is sort of your ideal integration container.
Being in that community.
Being in it. You're
So
also
if it
creating it, aren't you?
Right, because I want to be in it.
You're creating the one you want to be in.
Right, so
Right.
that's what I'm saying. It's
Yeah.
being in it.
Mm.
But again, and not from a place, 10 years ago, some of these same ideas could have been more like fighting, right? Like almost like, let me try to take another community and share these ideas. I'm not fighting anyone. I'm just doing my own thing, and those who are attracted to it will come, and like slowly, right? It will happen slowly will come. Those who are attracted will come. Those who don't feel like it's for them go somewhere else. You know, I had once a person call me. Maybe final thoughts after this. Call me for business advice, and I said, "Who else are you going to with these questions?" He was like doing startups and tech things and stuff like that, and it's not my world. Like I know boring business, buying and selling, small markups like that. Do it for a long time, consistency, build a customer base.
It's more my world.
Well,
It's more my world.
yeah. So I said, who else are you going to for advice? And he mentioned another person who we both knew, who could not live differently in business. So I said, okay. I said, wait, what you're trying to do, you can hear what I'm saying, but the way he asked the question was like, tell me what to do, almost. And I said, the way I see it is like if someone decided to get healthy, and then they called a runner, and they called a bodybuilder, and they said, what should I do? So before you decide who to call, because they're both healthy. I'm not saying, right? There are things I've done in business. I understand why you want to call me. And there are things that person has done in business. I understand why you want to call them. I do. And you can get input from many people. I'm not saying not to. But when you're talking about direction like that, you get direction from one.
Yeah.
And that direction is from someone who you admire to be. So look at yourself now. Do you want the runner's body or do you want the bodybuilder's body? Which life do you want?
Yeah.
You maybe the UFC fighter, like figure out what it is you want and then ask that person how he did it.
Yeah.
But if you start getting advice from the runner and the bodybuilder, you're going to end up with some sort of Frankenstein here, which no one's going to know what to do with. And I think the same is true when we're on our healing journey, when we're on others, people, like they get advice from a lot of different people. Everyone's voice matters in some way, but not everyone's voice should carry the same weight. Do they have what you want to have in this domain of life? And if they do, then hear what they have to say. And if they don't, then who cares what they say?
As you're talking, I'm reflecting back on the earlier conversation about, you said the Talmud, I was thinking the Mishnah, right? Right, Rebbe's decision to write down the Mishnah, to take the oral law. We still call it Baal Peh, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's books on books on books, right? And like, what was that risk? And I think the risk was that the idea that Judaism is a lived thing, right? That is meant to be modeled, and that the oral law was about learning from, it wasn't necessarily just about what was said, it was how it was said, right? And the feeling and the experience and the connection and the person and that relationship. And so, and writing it down would cheapen and dampen that and make it seem like it's about this thing, right? So the risk is codifying, standardizing, sort of stripping out that personal dimension, right? And I guess I'm just hearing the corollary to like what you're talking about now is if you're going to seek advice or want to emulate some person or some community, it's not necessarily about their steps, their framework. It's about the feeling. It's about who they are. It's about the experience of being with them and just how important that is. And that's so hard to write down.
Yeah, there's also so much of it is personal. Right?
Personal.
It's personalized.
It's personal.
I think when it comes to a rabbi, it's like a rabbi is not meant to rule on something unless they understand the subject matter at hand and the individual at the same time. And I think the term is like, they understand like gavra and chefza, right? The subject matter and the person. So the same would be for a community. I heard that the Friedrich Rebbe didn't want to talk about smoking, right? Even though objectively, once he understood it, it was not kosher to smoke. But to sit there and issue a ruling that something is not kosher, when you're not going to make a dent, people are addicted. So why are you ruling this? You're speaking into the ether. You're creating more problems by saying this. So we just like look at the book and look at the subject matter. If I only look at the subject matter, well, I'll say, okay, issue a ruling that smoking is not kosher. But if I look at the people, then I say, okay, I'm not going to deal with the ruling necessarily. I'll first deal with education. And maybe we need 30 years of education or 40 years of education to see the dent that it makes in smoking before we even talk about what Jewish law may say about smoking. Because there's a risk we run when we do that. If we issue a ruling that someone can't keep, then they may think the rest of it is irrelevant also, right? So it's understanding that, right, those details that become very important. It's that personal transmission to someone. Which a lot of therapists say, like very often, like you have a disclaimer I hear like the disclaimers on a podcast, like I'm not giving individual advice, because to an individual I may say something entirely different when I take in where they're at. It's not a one size fits all.
Yeah. And I shared with you, I wrote about this week, as I'm learning about in therapy. I think the thing that sort of connects for me, all the different work I do, and even what we're talking about now, is they've done meta studies and research around like what makes for an effective therapist, what makes for effective therapy. And you could almost sense the disappointment as they kept discovering time and time again, and the research kept confirming that the actual specific method, the goal was like, which method is the best? Which is CBT? Is it this? Is it that? Is it relationship? Like, is it IFS? Is it emotional? Is it like, which one's the best? Which one's the one that we should do? Because everyone has their best, right? And their version. It accounted for something like 8% of actual positive outcomes was the actual specific method used. And the most important, in the pyramid version of it, the second most important thing under that was the relationship, like a trusting, open relationship. But by far and away, the most important factor determining successful outcomes was what they called the therapist's way of being, was just, are they a person who is modeling emotional regulation, being a person, like are they, how they show up in the room. Meaning the work is outside the room. It's not specifically, am I asking you the right question at this point? Am I making the right intervention? Am I explaining this the right way? It's who am I in my life, that when I sit down across from you, like whether I'm going to be helpful to you in a healing relationship is just everything to do with how I show up. And I think that that's such a powerful lesson. And and then then the question becomes, well, why am I paying for the rest of school? How do you teach that? You can't teach that, right? But the techniques are important, because otherwise all that just feel good energy just spills out into the room. It's just like vibes, right? You have to have a container for it. You have to have trust. You have to have some version of a framework. But to confuse the syringe for the medicine is a tragic mistake, I think. Right.
And you're connecting this to religion also in some way.
Yeah, right. Because well, I also think that the mitzvahs themselves are like, I think we may refer to it as like spiritual technology, right? They're vehicles for conduits of our love and energy from.
I think they're considered clothing, right?
From God, right?
The Tanya, I think, considers them like clothing.
They're garments, right? But they're the strands of the rope, right? Or if we're connected to God by this rope, each one is a specific strand. But like, what's flowing through that, what's moving through that is connection, is relationship. And when we confuse the outside for the inside, or lose the, like, what is it that's being transmuted by the vessel of doing it, then I think that's when we fall off the razor's edge. We get in all sorts of trouble.
Got it. Beautiful. Okay, we went a lot of different directions, none which we expected, but which has become expected for me on this podcast. Okay. There's just, there's a conversation that I feel that wants to happen, and then it gets birthed through the conversation. So hopefully we hit the spot. This one, final thoughts before we close out?
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. To your point, like, I forgot that this camera was on a couple times. I just was enjoying the conversation with you.
Yeah, that's what it is, 100%. And there are times, I've said it many times before, that if this conversation, like if the recording failed, which has happened on Conversations, or for one reason or another, it doesn't get published, there was value for me in this conversation, and that's my goal. My goal is to have a conversation that I feel was worthy enough of a conversation, whatever worthy means, worthy enough of a conversation, independent of it being sent out. That's secondarily. If it was a good conversation, then hopefully others eavesdropping will benefit. So thanks so much. Appreciate you coming out. And we didn't talk about money. Maybe another time.